He was chosen to swing the holy sword and bring the light. But he wanted to get his hands on a wooden sword with. He can turbocharge plant growth. This tool grows food with some wild side effects. Each bite hits the eater in a totally different way. It slams your mana back into full power, like nothing drained you in the first place. Supercharged their magical powers and he surged back to life, breathing fresh energy into a body that had hit its limit. His body doesn't just heal him, it also restores everyone around him. He can even summon woodmen as his servants. But before I ruin the surprise, let's jump back into the story. Inside the royal castle of Krensa, the massive St. Vicelica Grand Cathedral loomed like a guardian over. The divine blessing ceremony is underway. This is the annual national tradition everyone's been waiting for. And now, 15-year-old Vale Orland is finally here, ready to claim the item meant for him. Vale trailed behind, heart hammering as someone shouted his name, and the whole group instantly shifted with a wave of buzz. Born into the Orland family, one of the most elite knight clans, Vale isn't just impressive, he might be the real deal. Because everyone expected him to join the Knight Order, he was desperately praying the divine sword would choose him. Vale shut his eyes, poured mana into his chest, and kicked off the ritual. But something felt terribly off. He didn't just know. He was born into this world with it already burning in his bones, like he understood everything even before he ever drew breath. It has to be a flashback carved from his past life. Vale sank into memories, remembering how he used to be just a regular, overworked office drone. His only escape was the game he played to pass the time. For almost 10 years, he'd been hooked on that one game, an addictive fantasy farm world that he was living in for real now. It was a world packed with swords and magic, where you could chase adventures all day. But the real magic was the farm life, calm, simple, and nothing like the harsh reality he was stuck in. He remembered every single thing that happened in the game, right down to the ceremony he himself was taking part in. With his memories back in full, he suddenly knew the exact item he needed. The dragon-hilted blade isn't just a weapon. It's worth more than any divine sword out there. He yanked the chest open and he burst into joyful shouts the moment he finally got exactly what he wanted, straining to catch the curious murmurs buzzing around them. He whipped out his sword to show it off, fully expecting the crowd to erupt over how insanely good it looked. But the second he showed that plain-looking sword, their laughter came crashing down on him. Right then, a hand clamped onto Vale's shoulder and demanded he step aside. Dirk Vale's cousin stood there with a smug grin, praising Vale's sword like he was poking fun at him. Sword in hand, and just like every cheesy manga trope in the book, his cousin got the divine blade, straight up blessed to him. The legendary blade his father demanded he claim. Right after Vale's father didn't just accept Dirk, he officially claimed him as his own son, and watched the raid's curtain drop, humiliating him in front of everyone. Then they shoved him out of their house, kicking him to the curb. They might look at the sword he just pulled and call it pathetic now, but he refused to back down. He was set on proving them wrong. He'd hand the family's future to Dirk, then ask for him and live for himself. Starting today, he's stepping into the fields and becoming a farmer. Vale stormed into the town of Riche and he convinced himself he'd be totally fine if he just had his sword in hand. It was forged like a dragonwood saber, and it didn't just look cool, it turbocharged his crop growth, thickened the leaves and fruits, and turned them more pest-resistant than ever, giving his farming skills the ultimate power-up. The game lets you live the peaceful farming life, then snap into quests, dive into dungeons, and hunt monsters, all while everything feels laid back and totally free. They're rushing toward a special place, one only the important ones get to reach in. Stepping right up to the dungeon entrance, he smiled. This was the perfect spot to start farming and rake in results. He pushed deeper and deeper into the dungeon. Then a brutal dead end slammed the door on his progress. What he was hunting for had to be hiding right behind that wall. Right as he raised his hand to draw his sword, he heard a woman screaming at the top of her lungs. A hulking boar-like monster came charging after her, hot on her heels. Realizing just how grim everything had become, he lunged in again and drove his sword straight into the ground. That charging boar they were staring down just seconds ago was. Soon, vines snapped around him and bound him tight. It's locking down its every move. And with Vale pushing him forward, the war. A woman whipped her sword through the air, slicing toward him, right as everything went deadly fast. And that's how he shuts down the monster for good. She exploded forward and cut the boar down in one brutal strike. After she screamed in triumph, her legs gave out. She pushed herself too hard and immediately stumbled. But Vale snatched her at the last second, and the moment she was safe, the woman apologized. Then Vale leaned in and asked, "Are you okay?" She raised both hands, begging Vale to believe she was okay. Then Vale finally blinked, saw she wasn't lying, and got her to take a break. And she finally crumpled to the ground, wiped out by sheer exhaustion. Vale stared at the problem, panicking because he had no idea what to do. He literally couldn't. She couldn't just run from her past, because the dungeon still teemed with monsters that would tear anyone apart. A dark veil crashed over her, wrapping her tight in cloth, and he slammed his sword into the dirt, and the moment it hit, woodmen rose from the ground. Finally, a stick-shaped wooden doll crawled out. These are the familiar summons from the dragonwood saber, and whether they level up fast or slow depends entirely on how brutal the game turns. After he called in a few more of them, he went and did it, like straight up. He decided to give them names, because juggling too many of them was getting downright tricky. He commanded them to haul the gear, and the monster they'd just crushed. The woodmen can't throw down in a fight, but man, put them on heavy lifting duty and they shine, and honestly it feels like the dragonwood saber isn't made for combat either. He strode back to the dead end, pressed his gaze to the wall, and spotted a magic circle etched there. They'll rush in, hoist that woman up in their arms, and carry her through. And then the woodmen came barreling after him. He still can't wrap his head around it. After staring at these landscapes for years, he's finally walking through them for real. At the edge of the hidden route, life hangs on by a thread. Beneath the ground, an underground lake sprawls in the dark. You can't even spot the magic circle he saw earlier, unless you've got a dragonwood saber in your hands. That's why this place is one of the rarest spots in the whole game. Step into the game, and once that rarity hits, you're about to rain down on rewards so wild they feel unreal. Vale carefully lowered the unconscious woman to the ground, and he told the woodmen, "Right here, put up the house. This is where it all begins." Then he stalked over to the lake, drove his sword into the ground, and stared. Because this underground water isn't just sitting there. It's ringed by rare rocky mineral veins in this space alone, so raw magic energy spills straight into the water. If you drank from that lake, every ounce of lost mana would roar back into your body. Because this whole underground lake was basically one massive holy water bottle. Vale pulled out a seed and started building the home he'd been dreaming up. Meanwhile, the unconscious woman, still out cold. Finally, he snapped awake and nearly choked when he saw a tree that was. And it was exploding forward at a ridiculous speed. Vale's focus snapped to something the moment, when the woman suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream after the tree's roots bound her tight. He rushed in and pulled her up right away. He tried to apologize for everything. Then she hit him first, saying she was the one who made him rescue her. She demanded to know where they were, and the second she realized they were still stuck in the dungeon, it all sank in. Then she gasped, because deep inside there was a breathtaking place she never expected to find. Seeing the tree still swelling bigger by the second, the woman demanded answers, and Vale told her it was a widley, a growth type that skyrockets at full speed. That wasn't some ordinary sapling. It was forged by the sword's power, born from the dragonwood saber's ultimate move, and it could regenerate seeds for fruits and vegetables people swear only exist in the heavens. Of course it had to be that way. This was a super rare seed, and you can only harvest it in places so dangerous they'll make your heart pound. She challenged the whole point of planting this tree, and Vale snapped back that he wasn't doing it for nothing. He planned to harvest the lumber and build a treehouse. Vale lunged to trim the tree's branches, snipping them down, and he immediately grabbed that wood, dreaming up simple furniture he could build with his own hands. To thank him for saving her, the woman offered her help. Vale turned it down. She kept insisting she'd help, still refusing to back down yet. But Vale reassured her, telling her everything was okay because he'd still got the woodman on his side. At last, they kicked off the construction of his treehouse. The woman huddled in the corner, eyes locked on them, desperate for even one way to step in. They smashed through finishing the treehouse way faster than planned, and the moment they peeked inside, Vale's jaw dropped, better than he ever dared imagine. Sure, they still needed a ton of stuff, but for tonight, it was more than enough to sleep in. The sunlight felt perfect, so good they wouldn't even need lamps in the day, and Vale thanked the woodman and handed them a breather. Then the moment he was left alone, he dropped onto his bed with a loud, heavy plop. Vale still had a mountain of stuff he wanted to do, but no rush. Somehow they'd make it there step by step, because time was theirs, and Vale ended up falling asleep. And when he finally hauled himself up to, I glanced out the window, and boom, night had already swallowed everything. He lingered way too long, leaving the woman stranded and waiting. Then he glanced down and saw the ground blazing with light. When he went down to check, he stumbled on her right there, while the woodman worked the dinner like it was already destiny. She couldn't muscle the heavy stuff, so she decided to repay him with something else, something from the heart. She dropped into a deep bow to show real respect, then thanked Vale all over again for pulling her out earlier. She finally snapped and said, "I'm Martina," then bragged she could cook pretty well, right as Vale completely panicked when he realized he'd forgot to introduce himself. She introduced herself and said her name first, then he rattled off his own, cutting out his family name so nothing got messy, before he quickly shook her hand and slipped away. After they finally met, they sat down and tore into dinner together. Vale took a bite of the dish, and the flavor hit like a flashback. This meat was definitely from that boar-type monster he'd faced earlier. Martina shoved even more food into Vale's mouth. She thanked him for letting her steal the final blow, because that kind of win is pure gold for any adventurer. Vale leaned in and asked, "So, are you in a party?" And when she snapped back, "No," he figured she was just getting started. Martina froze, thinking he was super sharp, only to realize he'd clocked her so easily because her honest reactions never hid anything. She demanded to know why Vale was even there, and she was utterly stunned when she found out he'd come all this way just to farm. She was totally baffled. How on earth could that happen, especially when they were trapped in a dungeon? Vale leaned in and explained how the tree out in the woodman's land. They summoned them all with the dragonwood saber's power. But it wasn't only the tree that made this land perfect. Martina discovered something even crazier, and it blew her mind. And she started packing in a hurry, because she'd already stayed way longer than she'd planned. Vale begged her to stay the night, because out there after dark was too dangerous. Martina shot him a grateful look as he ordered the woodman to stay on guard. Vale dragged Martina into the room they'd built together, and he started to walk out, but she stopped him and demanded, "Where do you think you're going?" When she heard he planned to sleep outside, Martina snapped into action and insisted she'd take his place. This was his brand new home, so he had to flop down in it and fall asleep first. When Vale tried to shut it down again, then Martina shoved him onto the bed and caw. Despite Vale's furious protests, it still convinced him to fall asleep with them. Eventually, she managed to pin him down and make him finally crash in it, and collapse beside him, drained to the bone and out cold. As he stared into the night, his mind raced through a mountain of things he still had to handle tomorrow. The very next day, Vale jolted awake and he stepped in and caught Martina kneeling on the floor. She hated that she'd dozed off, slumping against the veil, but he flashed a reassuring smile and told her he totally got it, because she was wiped out. Martina snatched Vale's arm and grilled him if he had a cramp, then offered a massage, and Vale quickly convinced her he was totally fine. She pulled Vale in and shared the breakfast she cooked side by side with him. After they finished eating, they hunted for fresh land to plant crops and finally settle into a calmer, steadier life. Once again, Vale slammed his sword into the ground, and the plants started crawling out, one horrifying step at a time. After testing the ground and realizing the soil was perfect, they're going to brandish that sword to summon a seed. Martina leaned in and asked what kind of seeds they had, and Vale grinned, saying they were called flame tomatoes. They're vegetables that crank up someone's fire magic to a whole new level. It all starts with ability-boosting crops, plain material crops and wild magical plants alike, grown to refill magic reserves or to forge powerful enchanted tools. Vale couldn't stop imagining all the wild new crops he could grow next. Before anything else, they urged the woodmen to jump in and help with the watering. Then the woodmen, with Martina right there, nodded and took on the job. Vale shot her a confused look, and she burst into laughter, like, "I guess I want to try it too." And then they all knuckled down and worked their tails off together. Vale and the woodmen would race to the lake, hauling bucket after bucket of water, while Martina pitched in by planting wherever they needed her. Both of them lit up with pure joy when they spotted a tiny sprout, and just like that, it shot up in the blink of an eye. At this pace, they'll probably be harvesting by the afternoon. So Vale decided to expand the field a bit more starting tomorrow, while Martina watched the grown seeds like they were about to burst into life. She was buzzing with excitement for the harvest, burning to cook too, and once Vale really thought it through, he couldn't ignore it. Martina was amazing at cooking, so why in the world did she choose to become an adventurer? Martina swore she'd read an adventurer's autobiography. This guy hunted ingredients across the world, cooked them himself, and lived off what he gathered, all while lending a hand to others. Martina was inspired to live the same way, and Vale erupted in cheers for her dream. Vale stared at Martina, trying to figure out what kind of person she really was. Right before he crashed for the night, he flashed back to the game's main crew, and Martina wasn't among them. Still, the world in there was definitely a game world. Vale threw caution to the wind and let fate take the wheel. After what feels like forever, The fast-growing seed finally cracks open and bears real fruit. Martina couldn't believe how fast everything changed. Then she grabbed a few fruits and handed them over for them to taste. They didn't just taste good, each bite hit like pure flavor magic. The Underground Lake's perks were insane, but Vale couldn't shake his worry, because he'd poured in way too many benefits at once. Martina pushed the idea to sell them in town, because adventurers always go wild for fresh veggies like that. Vale weighed his options, and since he'd planned to scout for daily necessities and wholesale spots anyway, he decided to go. If he wanted wholesalers, Martina told him to swing by the town of Dorison, because that place had an incredible item shop waiting for him. She'll swear it's the best stuff he's ever grown, so they decided to go. Martina stepped up and swore she was the guide. Right when they were getting ready to ask the woodman to carry the luggage, they grabbed every kind of wild item they could find, ready to put on a show. Act like you're slammed with something. Yeah, that's me when my mom tells me to do stuff, and I'm too lazy to care. Vale even suggested they go together, just the two of them, until a woodman suddenly tapped Martina. Martina, these idiots wore this smug. Soak up every second with us look on their faces. Martina just waved them off and snapped that it wasn't a date, and if you look closely, you'll catch me grinning in the back with the woodman. We ship it. Before they even left, they stuffed their backpacks with flamed tomatoes, and they both asked, "What kind of item shop are we hitting?" Martina shot back that it was the biggest item shop in all of Doris, the Reimer Company store, and Vale's jaw dropped when he heard that. Even with the tight rules, locking down an exclusive crop contract keeps the money steady, and during gameplay, he leaned on it like it was pure lifeline. Company boss Gregory Riamar, aka the Great Merchant, pulled the whole operation from the ground up by himself, and in the game's world, he's widely hailed as one of the most unstoppable top-tier characters. If they can land wholesale prices, it would be a huge win, but without any connections, this is going to be brutal. Halfway through their journey, they stumbled on a girl sprawled on the ground, radiating a mage's presence. Martina rushed up and asked what happened, and the girl admitted her magic power was completely gone. Monsters were rampaging on the edge of town, and while her comrades begged her to grab magic replenishing items, her legs could barely carry her another step. After wrestling with what they could do next, they're gonna push their crops onto the table. She fed the flame tomatoes to herself, blasting her magic back to full power. Magic surged back to life the moment the tomato hit his mouth, and his magic was restored fast, like it was refueling in real time. She lit up and praised the tomato's incredible taste, and both of them couldn't stop smiling at the sound. Vale then urged her to hand some over to her comrades, so she grabbed them and rushed them straight to where they needed to be. When they finally arrived, they saw her comrades going toe-to-toe with a whole pack of wolf-like monsters. One of the wolves spun toward Vale and Martina, and growled, lunging forward like he was about to rip into them. But before the monster could move, the mage snapped her staff up and incinerated it with a brutal spell. Vale thanked her even as she stood there, dazed and staring at her own hand, her mind reeling from the massive power she'd just unleashed. Her comrades closed in, and first a bob-haired mage snapped that she was too slow, while the pigtails girl pressed her about the wild power she'd just unleashed, because she wasn't usually like that. The mage shot her finger toward them, and declared that those two were the ones who carried the ingredients to refill her magic. Vale dropped their backpacks to the floor and shoved his flame tomatoes into the other's hands. One single tomato was all it took. Boom, instant strength hit them like a wave. They charged right back at those monsters that came for them all over again, after they finally sealed their strength back into their magic. Together, they shot their staves into the air in perfect sync and tore the sky open with their full power. A massive blaze swallowed the monsters whole, scorching them to nothing. Vale grinned, thrilled at the vegetables. He grew it all, and somehow it could be eaten, or even turned into something useful. The mage thanked the two, because without them the monsters would have wiped everyone out. So Vale let out a relieved smile, glad he could help, and then he waved goodbye. But the mage intercepted them the second she realized they still hadn't paid for the tomatoes, while Vale kept insisting, "Don't worry about it." She refused to back down, shoved a pouch of gold into his hands, and both of them blinked at the sheer amount. Yet the mage swore it was a fair price, especially after what that tomato could do. And yep, she grabbed the rest of the tomatoes too. As they headed back home, Martina couldn't stop smiling. She'd sold out before they even hit town. And that earlier moment somehow sparked Vale's confidence. He swore he'd work his hardest to grow vegetables good enough to supply the guild next time. Martina gazed at him with sweet fondness and promised she'd help as much as she could, for now, at least. So they agreed to focus on shopping since they'd just raked in a fortune. Meanwhile, that mage from earlier bursts into a shop, hunting for healing potions. She took a step back the second she heard him getting scolded for not taking proper care of the tomatoes he was selling. They said the owner of the item shop was Gregory Reimer, and she called him strict to his face. Then Gregory dug in like a brick wall and snapped that they wouldn't sell anything subpar there. Sure, it wouldn't grow the variety of vegetables, but he couldn't change that, especially with no decent farmers showing up around lately. Then he started wondering, did she need a fresh stash of magic replenishing potions today? But she just snatched up some incredible tomatoes, raving that they refill your magic fast and even crank up your power. So in seconds she was wiping out monsters, and Gregory immediately demanded, "Show me those tomatoes." Then the mage shoved one into his hands, and Gregory took one look. Everything he checked was straight up top tier. Back to Vale and Martina now. After all that chasing, they finally burst into Dorison, a buzzing town full of life. Merchants keep flooding into this town because it sits right between the East and West's biggest cities, turning it into the ultimate relay stop for everything that moves. That's why the place is packed with stops and little eats. Martina pushed us to have fun all day, from cruising Central Street on foot to diving into street stall snacks. But for now, they ditched the drama and hit the shops for the essentials. Vale had one mission: grab fabrics like bedsheets and window glass, but their plan to swing by the Riamar Merchant Guild fell apart when they realized they'd completely sold out of tomatoes. Martina pushed for the furniture shop instead, because she knew a huge place that even rents you a wagon, only if you buy in bulk. They tracked down the store Martina swore by, and boom, everything they needed was right there. They stormed into the bed section, while Martina kept talking up the corner where they could test every pillow and mat imaginable. And it felt exactly like the huge furniture store Vale had seen in her old life. Vale stood there debating the pillows on the shelf, then he quickly snatched the cheapest one. Martina grumbled that he kept settling, then pushed him to pick a different one so he could finally get a better night's sleep. She yanked him over to the corner, and they started testing everything until they could find the pillow that actually fit Vale. And he kept trying one after another so many times that he started to lose track of which one was truly the best. They sprawled across a king-sized bed, and somehow both of them fit with room to spare. Vale wondered if he should have grabbed a bigger bed too. Then Martina shot up, cheeks burning, caught on the thought of sleeping together. Vale shut it down fast, insisting his bed was perfectly fine because he'd be sleeping alone. After countless rounds of testing, they finally nailed it down to just 2 pillow options. So Vale shut his eyes, took a breath, and made the choice. He sank into the pillow and just kept thinking. He figured it might be perfect, then nervously begged Martina to try it too, his voice trembling. Martina insisted the thing he was leaning on wasn't really a pillow. Vale blinked, snapped his eyes open, and realized he'd been propped up on Martina's bazooka the whole time. He backed up on the spot and blurted out an apology, and even Martina jumped in to apologize too, for messing things up and sounding confusing. Blushing to the core, they snatched up the nearest pillows they could find and then decided to go with those. After that, they powered through the rest of their shopping for every other necessity they still needed. By the time they finally made it back, the world was already swallowed by night. They couldn't believe their eyes. Fresh crops had sprouted and were already bursting with fruit. And just like that, a fence shot up, turning the place into a proper farm for real, so much more than Vale ever imagined. He couldn't help it. He thanked the woodmen for every bit of their hard work. They even set up the other rooms with fresh furniture. Look at them, they're practically bursting with pride. Meanwhile, one of the woodmen marched up to Martina and grilled her about how their date went, and she swore up and down it never happened. But yeah, nobody's buying it. The harvest kicks off tomorrow right after sunrise, but Vale isn't taking them to the Reimer Merchant Guild yet. He wants to taste the paprika first. While they were already at it, Martina suddenly decided to cook them for dinner, and he jumped at the idea with pure excitement. As she cooked their dinner, Vale decided to sort through everything they'd snagged in town, and roped in 2 woodmen to help him. Vale yanked the cart along, lost in thought. Selling the tomatoes today was a win, but the cash they brought in is nearly gone already, just from today's shopping. He's praying their crops land a good deal with the Merchant Guild next time, because if luck's on their side, maybe they can finally lock in a stable trade agreement. He snapped back to reality when a woodman yanked on his sleeves and Vale snapped his eyes up, following the woodman's pointed finger as it jabbed straight above the lake, and then there she was, plunging into the lake like gravity had turned against her. Vale yanked out his sword and drove its blade into the ground like a warning. He hurled the plants into the air, forcing them to bloom into a cushion that caught the girl mid-fall. Hearing the chaos, Martina rushed up to Vale and demanded to know what was going on. Mom couldn't believe her eyes when Vale showed her the unconscious girl. She'd crashed through a hole in the ceiling. She was okay, but her eyes just wouldn't open. So Vale hauled her straight into the room the woodmen had set up while they were away. Martina could only pray she was safe, and that she wasn't a threat. Vale stared at the girl's sleeping face, burning with one question: who was she really? She's gotta be a maid. Just look at what she carries and how she's dressed. Suddenly, the girl jolted awake and locked eyes with him. He spun around and asked the girl if she was okay, but the girl shot him a ruthless glare and demanded to know who he really was. She snatched her staff and grilled him on the spot, while Vale rushed to calm her, saying, "I run the farm in this dungeon. I only caught you when you fell, growing plants and using my sword's power to turn them into a cushion." And the girl's suspicion only sharpened. She was sure he was feeding her pure nonsense. She shrugged into her robe and bolted for the door, but Vale lunged in front of her. Because out there, late at night, danger doesn't play. And I told her she needed to slow down and rest a little more first. The girl screamed at him to back off, and Vale immediately apologized before letting her go. She stumbled from it, but Vale shot in and caught her just in time. Now she's whining that Vale let go of her hand, like she didn't have the nerve to tell him to do it in the first place. Right then, Martina leaned in and peeked inside the room. Wearing a worried look, he blurted out if they'd become friends. Then she eagerly offered the veggie marinade she'd made herself. She thrust a fork toward the girl, but then his hand clobbered hers so hard the fork flew out of her grasp and clattered onto the floor. Martina shot her a furious glare for wasting food and acting like the cook's feelings didn't matter. Then the girl just shrugged, told her to get out of the way, and walked on. Vale kept begging the girl to stay the night, because those carnivorous plants get vicious after dark, but she refused and insisted on leaving anyway. Martina finally snapped at her rude attitude and stormed straight up to confront her. But the girl snapped her off and shoved the two of them forward, telling them to just team up and casually play at farming together. Before they stormed out, all they could do was sigh hard and stare at the ceiling, wondering about. She bolted off without a clear reason, slipped into the forest after midnight, and the whole time she didn't look like she was thinking straight. Yet Vale's kindness hit her like a lifeline. Martinez told her to head into the forest and look for her, because she was terrified to leave her behind like this. It'd be a total shame if she didn't take a bite of the veggies she just made. So they charged into the forest, while the woodmen stayed behind, snagging the supplies and standing guard over the house. Meanwhile, the girl drifted through the forest, panic chewing at her, because the clock was ticking and she couldn't find it anywhere. Then she heard a noise behind her. He turned to her, and they spotted a carnivorous plant lurking right there. If anyone caught her, it would be a total disaster, so she had to vanish from there. No time to waste. Then a strange herb snagged her attention. Lanilo, the very one she'd been hunting for. She slammed her magic down and froze the carnivorous plants in their tracks. And then he unleashed the attack. But it totally failed, and that carnivorous plant lunged and pinned her down with its roots. She was seconds from getting swallowed alive when once the plant's veil trapped him, he ripped it open with his sword, and the whole thing peeled back as the darkness gave way. Martina hauled the girl to her feet, and when they asked her why they were there, she admitted they only came because they couldn't stand the thought of leaving her alone. Vale snapped that they had to bolt out of there, right now and fast. But she couldn't grab them, because the medicinal herbs she'd been hunting sat right beside a carnivorous plant. If that's what it takes, then they have to take it down first. But nothing they throw at it lands, because Vale just made it clear. Physical hits and magic damage won't work on that carnivorous plant. If they ripped both roots at once, it would freeze mid-motion and stop dead. Vale sprinted to the other side as a decoy, slipping off to draw attention away while roots sank in and slammed the carnivorous plants into stillness. Then their leaves wilted fast. They finally got the green light to take the landelo. No more waiting. That earlier tremor tore up the herbs and left them ruined. Vale crouched over the wrecked herb, and there, hidden in the ruins, he spotted a single seed. She figured the seed was worthless, because that herb takes almost a whole month to finally bloom. Vale and Martina locked eyes, both instantly understanding. Maybe they could finally do something about this. She couldn't believe it. She was back at the underground lake again, and for a second she even wondered if Martina really hated her, but she couldn't blame her at all. As they trekked on, Vale leaned in and demanded to know why she even needed that medicinal herb. Turns out she needed it to whip up a brand new magic potion for a class assignment at the academy. And yep, the academy was in the game too. If Vale's memory didn't betray him, this was the Royal Minist Academy. Her assignment was due in a week, and panic chewed at her. Like she might not finish in time anymore, so she sprinted, no time to waste. But in just a week, Vale will grow the seed into something unstoppable. Even with everything on the line, she can't bring herself to believe it'll be ready in time. Vale grabbed her attention and promised, "Don't worry, we'll have it done in 3 days." It wasn't hopeless, as long as he still wielded the Dragonwood saber's power. He jammed the seed into the hole right above the sword's handle. He busted out his board and called in a whole swarm of lanolosids. Then just one seed turned into a full-on explosion of them. By gulping down vegetable and plant seeds, he learned to grow them again, reborn through magic plants, simple in concept, unstoppable in practice. And with that, their options explode. Now they can grow a whole wider range of crops than ever before. They dropped the seeds into the soil, and within minutes they were already sprouting like lightning. At this pace, that herb should be blooming by tomorrow at noon. It felt like straight-up magic, But the Dragonwood saber wasn't just any blade. It was built for the fields, an agriculture-specialized power. Honestly, it felt less like a weapon, and more like some absurdly specific item. The girl burst into laughter and nodded along, because if he raised his sword in a fight, he'd snap to pieces in an instant. Vale watched her with a warm smile, loving how she could finally laugh the way she truly wanted. She swore she'd been natural from the start, but the truth is, at first she was totally a little tsundere. Now that she finally clocked it, he wasn't swinging that sword to fight. He was using it like a farming tool. Blushing hard, she twirled her hair and thanked him, while the danger loomed, for stepping in to help her, and for even growing the herbs she desperately needed. She bowed low and apologized for doubting him, and Vale just answered with a calm, reassuring smile. And he leaned in, told her it didn't even bother him, and that meant everything was fine. Right when they were about to keep talking, everything got cut off mid-sentence. When Martina, rocking a cute checkered apron, burst out and called them for dinner. She whipped up a feast with their freshly picked veggies, crafting every kind of dish imaginable. Martina snapped her voice up to grab the girl's attention, then bowed hard to apologize for how harsh she'd been earlier. Like she knew the girl was probably on edge the whole time, and she'd still been painfully insensitive. The girl couldn't believe it. Why was Martina begging for forgiveness when she was clearly the one who screwed up? And after they still helped her, Martina turned around and spit out those awful words, and then even worse. And he even handled the vegetables with zero care, because seeing her so crushed broke his focus. Martina shoved a forkful of the veggies into her hands and told her to try it, this time as peace offering and a fresh start. She wanted to bury the hatchet with Martina so badly, but the moment she bit into those squishy tomatoes, she recoiled in disgust, because she didn't taste a single bit of that familiar bell pepper bitterness, like she hated them for real. Martina begged her to take just one bite, and the second she did, her whole face lit up, because it tasted incredible, nothing like the tomato she'd had before. And her mana keeps surging upward, like it's alive. One is a flame tomato, the other a thunder bell pepper, and every single one of those wild wonders was growing in that very field just now. She couldn't wrap her head around it. These vegetables were insanely rare, and almost nobody managed to grow them. But Vale insisted he hadn't done a thing. It all came down to Dragonwood Saber, and the dungeon's raw power, pushing those ingredients to grow into pure deliciousness. Martina's MasterChef magic made everything taste twice as good, and the girl listening couldn't hold it together, trembling hard as tears poured down her face. Years passed, and she still couldn't find the words, because they'd poured their heart and soul into these vegetables, then even took the time to cook them just for her. They told her the crops shoot up fast thanks to magic, and the marinade only gets massaged and left to soak for about 10 minutes. No big deal at all. She couldn't wrap her head around that, because in her mind they should have been bragging like crazy. They just pulled off something incredible. But the two only grinned, calling her cute, yeah, a tsundere with a warm heart. Next day, they dug into a feast made from the freshly harvested ice pumpkin, an ingredient that supercharges ice magic. Yesterday, Vale couldn't stop worrying how it would all go, but somehow Martina and Chiara clicked instantly. After they finished eating, they loaded their cart with every crop they'd harvested, ready to trade it in Dorison. But before they could even get out of there, Chiara pushed for a shortcut, straight through the upper forest to reach town faster. Vale went there for the first time yesterday. Just imagine the shock. She asked how he even found the place, and he shrugged and said, "Through the dungeon." When he tried to bring up the game, it wouldn't come out. Martina got nervous fast, worried they'd make it through without getting lost in that crushing, maze-like forest. Then Chiara flashed a smug grin and ordered them to hand over navigation to her. Sure, the human entry point sat on the top floor, but they had a cart. Vale told her not to worry and told both of them to climb on, and the moment they did, he slammed his sword into the ground as a massive plant shot up, lifting the cart like it was nothing. After he finally clawed his way to the top floor. At work, Chiara took the lead, blazing ahead like she owned the place. Before long, they were rolling into the Dory Sind town, and right into Raymer's item shop, where everything was finally about to happen. Vale clutched a basket of his crops and stepped inside, all nerves, while Chiara clocked that shift instantly and demanded to know where his big energy from earlier had vanished. Vale was drenched in sweat, scrambling to tell her he was calming down little by little. Yet the water dripping off him said the opposite, and Martina just smiled and assured him that Gregory was a genuinely good person, so there was nothing to fear. Vale couldn't shake the feeling she'd met Gregory before, until she told him she had, and his nerves finally eased. Their talk got yanked to a stop when a man stepped up, Gregory, and asked if they needed anything from him, and Vale instantly looked nervous. He found Gregory terrifyingly intimidating, and nothing like the guy he'd pictured in his head. And now, he's got zero nerve to even try talking to someone like that. While Vale and Chiara went stone still under Gregory's crushing presence, Martina lit up with a cheerful greeting, because Gregory actually seemed to like her. He leaned in and quizzed her about her very first dungeon, a wild choice, and her answer hit hard. Her first dungeon was brutal, full of monster attacks, so when Gregory saw how rough it was, concern flared in his eyes as he asked if she was really okay. Martina shot back that she was fine, thanks to Vale, who saved her. Gregory spun toward Vale and heaped praise on him for a job well done, and right then Vale felt like the kind of guy you'd trust with your life. Gregory clocked the veggies sitting in Vale's basket, and that was his opening. He leaned in, bragged about his recent farming, and told Gregory he'd come all the way to Dorison just to get him to taste the crops he'd been growing. But there was no need to. Gregory already knew exactly what a flame tomato tasted like. One of the magician's Vales saved him, and that's what let him try it. Vale's eyes lit up from the taste and that crazy magical kick, and hope surged as he asked Gregory to stock it in his store. Gregory wanted to say yes badly. Magic-filling replenishment veggies pack serious power, but they come out dry, tasteless, and totally flavorless. So nobody wants them, and they barely get ordered at all, while adventurers and knights keep riding out of town, shrinking the customer crowd and crushing demand. He refuses to stock products with zero sales potential, because in business, every move depends on buyers, and this world doesn't play nice. Vale didn't even blink. Giving up now would have been pointless, even if the only real buyers were adventurers. But he was sure the regulars would dig it too, so he bowed low and begged Gregory for a shot, stunned that someone this young could be this bold. Gregory decided to put him through a test. Next, Vale has to unload every single vegetable he brought today in just 3 hours. No discounts, and every veggie must go for 501. But Chiara can't believe this challenge is even fair, because 501 is basically double what these vegetables are worth. Even Martina could tell Vale needed to rethink it, but Vale's stubborn determination didn't back down. He still stepped up and took the test. Yeah, this is not going well at all. It's been a whole hour, and it feels like forever. And yet not one single charm ever sold. Chiara snapped that he'd taken on an impossible job, like they weren't going to sell a thing at all. Martina didn't expect things to get so ugly, getting ignored like that, so she lunged in to stop the fight, because every swing was only raking in even more unwanted attention. Right on cue, 2 adventurers strolled past, and Martina hawked her vegetables as perfect for magical replenishment. Yet the black-haired adventurer already knew they weren't tasty. After they saw that price tag, they snapped and walked off, way too expensive, so they grabbed the same things cheaper at the market. Like Gregory said, those magical vegetables seem cursed with bad reputations that run way too deep, so they're going to need a whole new strategy. Martina snapped to it, she had an idea, and snatched Chiara over to help her. They tied on those adorable aprons, commanded everyone's eyes on them, and threw a tasting event featuring their freshly harvested vegetables. While the 2 cooks chopped their veggies, a random passerby couldn't look away. The moment the food was finished, they dove in and took a quick taste right away. And they stared in shock as that flame tomato burst with sweet, fire-kissed flavor. Right then, the mage from yesterday practically begged to sample the ice pumpkin. When they spotted the fresh harvest, thunder peppers and ice pumpkins, everything felt like it was about to explode. When she reached the pumpkins, she grabbed a few for herself too, turning the whole stall around. And Vale, his stomach tightened at the thought his vegetables might flop, so her choice felt like a lifeline. She stared at the price tag and scoffed at the waste, then grabbed even more of each. She grabbed a cup and took a taste, like she was testing destiny one sip at a time. He blared those ads at full volume, so everyone around could hear them. Because the mages hooked them up, plenty of adventurers lined up to buy from them. But they were still nowhere close to selling out. Honestly, they might have bought way too much. After everything that's happened, there's only so far this wild ride can stretch before it snaps. They were small, and once people in the crowd saw the price, they'd backpedal fast. Because these special tomatoes cost more than regular ones, and honestly, most buyers didn't even need some magical refill. They cranked up the effort to pull in even more customers when Vale spotted a tired man who looked like he'd been pushed past his breaking point. He grabbed a cup of their vegetables and marched straight up to him. The man was utterly wrecked, no real rest at all, and even lunch breaks couldn't touch that kind of crushing fatigue. Vale understood the truth. He'd been like that in his previous life, too. He thrust the cup of vegetables into his hands, and the moment he tasted those vegetables, tears burst from his eyes. He hadn't had anything this delicious in ages. And somehow, fatigue didn't even stand a chance. It felt like it vanished. It's not just magic that refills you. This place also wipes out fatigue and brings you back to full power, and I swear it's all thanks to the underground lake's blessings. The man, now looking healthier than ever, hurried to buy fresh vegetables. And the crowd watching leaned in like something was about to explode. He rushed over to grab some for himself, too. And that's when they hit the jackpot. Every last ticket sold out. They sprinted back to Gregory's shop to brag about their win, and that's when it hit. Gregory was already watching them from the shadows, like he'd known the moment they did it. And he didn't just get excited about adventurers being the buyers. Even the ordinary crowd couldn't resist them. Vale crushed his test, so now he's set to stock up on vegetable goods for his store. After they locked the deal in place, they rushed home, tore into a lavish dinner, and from that moment on, he could finally farm with a calm heart and real peace of mind. Tomorrow he'll start prepping veggies for shipment. Then, right after, his mind will race to the treehouse. He jerked when Chiara's voice hit, and the next second, his coffee shot right out of his mouth. The girls were soaking in the new, huge bathhouse on the first floor, but their loud chatter about bazookas boomed through the whole place. Yeah, typical girl talk, I guess. They might have to crank the bathhouse walls into full soundproof mode. Inside the bathhouse, the girls gushed about how absolutely amazing it was. Tucked away in lush, living nature, they stumbled into spots brimming with mouth-watering food. With her cheeks burning, Chiara blurted out, asking if she could stay. Martina thought it was a brilliant move, but the call was always Vale's, because deep down she wanted to stay too. But her fear clenched tight, and she still couldn't find the nerve to ask. But if they team up, she'll finally feel brave enough to believe in herself. They decided to team up and ask Vale together. But he'd already caught their whole conversation. And when he said he wanted to keep living together, they agreed instantly, of course. Sandra Chiara got flustered, and without thinking, hurled a bucket at him. In just a few days, Chiara and Martina's. His rooms instantly felt more his own as the woodmen slid in fresh furniture and filled every corner with new life. Chiara proudly lifted the curtain she'd bought for everyone, and the adorable cooking tools she stumbled upon. Girls absolutely eat this kind of thing up. So when Vale dropped his comment, Chiara snapped that his room was way too plain. Vale figured he'd be stuck with nothing but lonely farm days, but somehow he wound up with a bright, happy life, laughing with Martina, Chiara, and the woodmen instead. And the more he thought about it, he's freaking out that Chiara being away from school will wreck her studies. But she calmly tells him it's fine, she's still enrolled, just as a research student. And even if she skips classes, she'll rack up the credits she needs for graduation as long as she submits her assignments. In her age group, nobody usually becomes a research student. So yeah, she's a rare exception, and it's exactly why she stands out. Martina had zero trouble staying there. She's an adventurer after all. But her heart kept snagging on Chiara's family, and Chiara stepped in again, assuring them that everything was fine, that there was no problem. Because her mom and dad barely hovered at all. Heck, they'd just shrug and tell her to do whatever she wanted. Especially her mom, who was juggling a million things. So yeah, it had to be this way. Still, Martina couldn't help it and pressed her, asking what her mother actually does, and then learned she's a magic researcher. She digs into spellwork at Chiara's academy, and everyone talks about her like she's one of the world's top minds. Once you hear how she's described. Then Vale was left with only one name on his tongue, Seraphine Fontaine-Mayer, and Chiara froze in shock because she didn't expect Vale to know her. But of course, Seraphine was a legend, so it made perfect sense. In the game, Seraphine grabs a support role just like Gregory. She trades crops for clutch, useful items to keep everyone rolling. He had no clue she already had a daughter, and that she'd gotten married too. Vale couldn't stop wondering. Was Chiara panicking about the assignment because she wanted to rush it to her mom and prove something? Mom, yeah, that was the deal. Her report on Lana Lo was already finished and due tomorrow, but she still couldn't shake the fear that it might not be good enough. Even after everyone told her to stop worrying and reminded her how hard she'd been grinding on it since she arrived, she kept second-guessing herself anyway. So Vale stepped in and told him, "Martina, come with me. If she's that worried, we're going too." Martina told her she could count on them whenever trouble hits, no matter what. And Vale started talking big, promising she'd cross to the ends of the earth if it meant saving her. Chiara suddenly bursts into laughter, because his wild exaggeration somehow nails the joke, and deep down she's grateful to both of them. They huddle up tonight, mapping out every single thing they'll need for tomorrow. Then, just like that, the very next day they finally crashed through the gates of Krenza's Royal Minist Academy. Chiara's hands shook like she was about to crack, and her nerves were screaming at full volume. So Vale went full soothing mode, and thank heavens, Chiara finally loosened up. He handed them a little nod, thanked them, and then, after wishing her luck, he went inside alone. The two of them decided to roam the academy, using the wait time to explore everything around them. They stared in awe at the magical research facility and every crazy detail. And Vale was so overwhelmed that he swore he'd finally go on a pilgrimage to the holy fantasy sites in that farm story. Even the garden looked like pure magic, breathtaking in every single corner. Martina has dreamed of seeing it up close for ages, but she never once thought it would actually happen this way. She'd been to the capital once before for her dad's job, but she's only ever caught a glimpse of the academy from far away. Vale couldn't stop asking herself what kind of crazy work her father does. And Martina shot back that he was just like a merchant. He figured Martina might be wrestling with some heavy family problems too, but he couldn't exactly pry into anyone else's life. And honestly, it looked like everyone was buried in their own battles. Right when Q-Dirk clocked Vale. "Are you kidding me? What perfect timing." Dirk sneered like he'd already been swallowed by death after they kicked him out. Then when they pressed him about why he was even at the... Vale said he was there as an escort and had a real job now, but Dirk pressed him hard. Was there any work out there that even someone like him could pull off? Vale noticed he wasn't even struggling. He was genuinely having a blast every single day. Yet Dirk just kept laughing at him, mocking him to his face. Vale was talking about how he planned to sell vegetables, and even sealing an exclusive deal with the Riamar Merchant Guild. Dirk straight up couldn't believe what he was seeing, and he snapped his sword toward Vale, swinging for the... But Vale snapped his attack out of the way and shot back a warning. "Don't you dare pull moves like that in the academy." Dirk clicked his tongue, tossed out some nonsense, and walked off. Bro swore he'd just pulled off something big. Vale and Martina sank onto a bench in the garden, side by side as the air hummed around them. She couldn't stop snapping about Dirk's disrespect. Then Vale jumped in and said, "We're stepbrothers," and that there was way more history between us. Still, he snapped into a panic and apologized to Martina for scaring her. She started to push back with something else, but he leaned in and told her it was all good. He'd finally stopped letting it bother him. Chiara skipped right up to them, laughing. Then she tripped hard and went down. Martina fired off a question about her report, and thankfully she'd managed to submit it. She could barely contain her excitement. Her mom's praise was everything, so she practically bolted over to tell me. After she learned they were the ones helping her, her mom lit up and said she'd love to meet them, then invited them straight to the research building. They stomp up the building stairs. He started comparing everyone there to Vale, and the crazy part, Vale wore the exact same look on his face the whole time, even while working. Finally, they burst up to a fancy door, and right there, her mother was on her knees, apologizing for the chaos she'd left behind. Vale stood there, stunned, because she looked exactly like the character from the game. No doubt about it, this was Seraphine. She stepped forward, introduced herself, and greeted them like they'd just met destiny. Chiara felt a heavy, heartfelt debt to them because without their help the report never would have been finished. But they pushed back hard, saying they only handed over the herbs while the real legwork, the analysis and research, was all powered by Chiara's grit. Chiara, the one who's usually loud as can be, was standing there blushing, absolutely losing it after being hit with madness. Seraphine shot her a look and burst into a chuckle. No wonder Chiara was saying stuff like that. Turns out, once she filed the report, Chiara showed up and begged her for permission to move in together. She couldn't believe it. Seeing that kind of fire in her for the very first time made her light up with pure joy. So she told them from this day on to look after her daughter, and they agreed right away, smiling like they couldn't wait. Seraphine tore through her drawer and dangled seeds from a rare plant, asking Vale if he wanted them. It was the seed of an Oron, an absurdly overpowered crop that left no creature in the game untouched, packed with insane magic that lets you control life any way you want. But there's a catch. Farming it and even getting its seeds are both brutally difficult, high-level missions. With the dragonwood saber tucked away in the underground lake, this should have been smooth sailing for him. But still, he couldn't shake the worry that taking something so priceless might be wrong. Then Seraphine just laughed and told him it wasn't a risk at all. It was a reward, because she believed in him. She's decided he's the only one who can handle it, so she's handing the veil to him, and Vale is over the moon to be trusted. And he nodded, agreeing to raise it. Seraphine flashed him a wink, then dropped a bunch of cryptic words that left him totally baffled. Vale didn't get it, so she demanded an explanation, but the girl brushed it off as if she was just praying Vale would get along with her daughter. Still clueless, Vale stood there while Chiara finally caught the meaning and snapped at her to quit saying those weird things. At the underground lake, Vale kept going, adding more fencing around the farm, piece by piece, like he was fortifying a lifeline. They snagged a monster-repelling barrier fence from the Raymer Merchant Guild, slapped it right at the dungeon entrance, and let the barrier grass do its job. And get this, while they're gone, they even hire a woodman to keep everything under guard. They still had one last job, set up a separate field just for Alderaan. While planting the cure, Chiara figured Seraphine must have been crazy about Vale. She even pushed him to switch schools, while Vale just awkwardly chuckled, and Martina fretted that turning him down might have been a huge mistake, because with his talent he could have crushed those results. But Vale didn't mind one bit. He actually loved getting his hands dirty on the farm. And there was his stepbrother, Dirk, meaning Chiara was staring down a rough school life, because from what she knew, Dirk's family, the Knight family, was one of the most powerful noble houses on the whole continent. Vale had no choice. He spilled the whole truth, and he couldn't shake the guilt for what had happened. But Vale was buzzing with joy after scoring the Dragon Tree Sword, and for the first time, his life felt complete. He thanked both of them from the bottom of his heart for staying by his side. Chiara couldn't stand the overly sweet vibe anymore, so she pushed them to keep building the farm great together. After he planted every seed in the wrong place, every single one, they couldn't wait to get their hands on those fruits. Normally, it would take them a whole year to grow, so yeah, don't expect to see results anytime soon, and even with the lake, Vale has zero idea how long this growth spell is going to take. They had no choice but to stand guard and wait, staring it down with patience. Vale jolted awake with his body feeling weighed down by something unnatural, like an invisible hand had pressed him to the bed, and he couldn't shake the fear it was the woodman. But the moment he opened his eyes, as his eyes opened, a naked girl popped up right in front of him and begged him to play together. Vale snapped in shock, but the girl just wouldn't stop firing more questions, utterly lost and confused. Vale jerked upright, squirmed to get off him, and demanded to know who he really was. She shot him a nasty look and swore he was the one who raised her, like no way, right? But when he finally thought it through, yeah, the design really was like that. In the game, she had ivy wrapped around her body, not like she was fully nude. This exact look just blew up as a social media trend back then. Vale pulled her into his blanket and kept her hidden, because if anyone caught her like that, they'd be in deep trouble, so she had to grab something to wear first. The door burst open, and Martina and Chiara rushed into the room to call Vale down for breakfast. But what they saw inside was wrapped up in a barely clothed girl, and the blanket veil she threw over her slip, yeah, it slid right off. The two spun around to bolt with terror in their faces, and Vale scrambled to talk his way out of it, insisting it was all just a misunderstanding. But then the girl blurted out, "Dad," and everything changed, which left everyone even more baffled. Martina couldn't wrap her head around it. Vale had a daughter at his age. The girl was calling him Dad, and Vale demanded an explanation, but Martina just stared as she reasoned it out. He raised her from a seed, so of course that makes him her dad. Finally, Chiara cracked it. Those seeds they planted yesterday, she'd been dead wrong about them. She'd shot up so fast, way too fast for comfort. When everything finally calmed down, she sat down and dug into breakfast. Oran's body was completely swallowed by Isekai'D. Martina strutted like a proud banner and bragged that every veggie they ate had been grown by Vale, her so-called dad. At the farm, Aaron told everyone to hand the management over to her, because to her the plants weren't just crops, they were her friends. Vale almost lost it amid the chaos, but yeah, that's exactly it. She can control the power of plants. Then she shot back the question, were Martina and Chiara Vale's wives? And both of them snapped no, without missing a beat. Vale stepped up and introduced them as his friends, people he lives with day in and day out, and he demanded she quit calling her dad because he wasn't even married or dating anyone. Alran finally caved and started calling him by his name. He even pointed out he had Martina and Chiara in his corner, partner or not. Chiara grabbed her own cheeks and snapped, "Stop rambling, say only what matters." Tears streamed down her face as Chiara let go, and she clung to Martina, sobbing that it would only be hers if she chose to pick her mother. Martina tried to picture them as family. Then her face went hot, and she blurted that it was way too soon for that. Soon they started scratching their heads. What in the world were they supposed to call Alran, when that name already belonged to the plant itself? Vale tossed out Hanan as her name, and the second she heard it, she lit up like she'd found the perfect one. Now that they've finally locked in the name. And yeah, he's got to hustle. He needs to grab her some clothes before anything else. They finally rolled up to the Doris in town. Hanan slipped on clothes instead of Ivy, and Chiara snapped at Martina and Hanan. Hainan and Vale, sorry Hainan, were dressed in matching outfits like a parent and a kid, but the fit swallowed Hainan a bit too much. Vale wondered if he should have snagged clothes from Chiara instead, and then Chiara spun toward him with a sharp glare as if she just caught wind of his mean thoughts. Vale immediately shot back a quick denial. They headed straight for the Riamar Merchant Guild, and Jennifer, the receptionist, greeted them with a sharp smile. Vale tossed her the vegetables and leaned in, asking about Gregory, only to find out he's tied up right now, meeting a client. Jennifer spotted Hanan and immediately lost it over how adorable she was, while Hanan shook with fear, trembling like she expected the worst. Vale asked Jennifer to calm down, and she quickly apologized, because the girl just gets wild the moment she spots something cute, like Hanan hiding behind her dad. They sprinted upstairs to the second floor, hunting for clothes for Hanan. Since she didn't have any real options, she'd have to hit the runway with a whole string of fashion shows. Hainan stepped out in a cute dress, but Jennifer wouldn't let it go. She pushed Hainan into trying even more outfits. Hainan stared at the huge pile and realized she couldn't pick one, so she immediately grabbed Martina and Chiara to help her decide. But they were lugging a whole stack of dresses just so she could try them on. They had her slip into simple fits, a plain top and shorts with boots, then dressed her up in an adorable frilly dress. But they weren't done yet. They dragged her back in and pushed for just one more outfit after another. Hainan finally snapped and lunged into a fierce hug around Vale, shielding him from whatever was coming behind him. They couldn't stop asking what the hell happened, and Hanan kept refueling her strength, soaking in Vale's warm aura. It felt so good, like pure calm. The two just stood there, totally clueless, like they'd been hit with a mental glitch. Hainan snatched their hands, pressing in close just to feel Vale's warmth. Month rolled by, then the two blushed like they'd said too much, and that was enough for them. Seeing them so alive, he figured the girls would handle the rest. Suddenly, Gregory's voice blasted up from downstairs, and he pushed straight to the first floor to demand answers about what the heck just happened. On Gregory's side, the whole situation felt painfully awkward, like the air itself had turned ice cold. He was about to throw in his application for the quest, and he pulled Vale and like, "Come with me." Vale couldn't stop worrying, because neither he nor his sword could really fight. But Gregory's gut told him Vale's sword could be the key. So yeah, Vale nodded and agreed to tag along with them. On his way to the guild, he fired off a question about just how brutal the quest would be, and his jaw dropped when he realized it was an S-rank quest. They slammed into the Adventurers Guild, ready to make something legendary happen. Vale stared in disbelief, because the world around him looked exactly like the original story. As they were scanning the place, a man suddenly yelled out to them. Vale looked absolutely buzzing and blurted, "Felix!" right to the man's face. Then Gregory shot back, "So you already know him, huh?" He's the guild master of this town, so of course he'd know, no matter whether they'd met face-to-face or not. Felix Ordner, the guild master of Dorisin, and the kind of helpful ally you're grateful for. Felix already figured out why Gregory was hunting for him. This was all about the dragon hunt. But he promised Gregory to relax. He'd already roped in a whole crew of skilled adventurers. Gregory pushed to bring Vale onto the team, but Vale couldn't shake the feeling that he'd never pull it off. Then Felix shot a look back at the adventures and over at Vale too, thinking a kid like him couldn't possibly handle it, until Gregory stepped in and warned, "Don't ever underestimate him." Felix was convinced Vale could be the answer to everything, and if even Gregory, so sharp and perceptive, vouched for it, then there was only one move. Vale had to come with him. Vale couldn't shake the worry. He kept asking himself if there was anything at all he could do. He shot his hand up to catch Felix's attention and demanded details on the target. From everything they dug up, The dragon has moved into the forest path heading north, one of the main routes linking Dorison to a big town, and nobody in their right mind wants to risk crossing it while something like that is lying in wait. Worse, people whisper about attacks happening nearby too, but the dragon's exact motive is still a total mystery. Gregory jabbed at the map and warned them that the alternative roads were a huge detour, burning far more travel time. Because if they kept doing this, fewer and fewer merchants would keep showing up in Dorison until the town's economy hit a wall and started to stagnate. Vale couldn't brush this off, she kept thinking. So this is what it's like, a game where you're supposed to savor a slow, easy life. But yeah, the word dragon is real, and they do show up before players, not as monsters to enslave, but like living quest givers. You grow and deliver the crops they ask for, because these dragons roam across the world and can actually talk with humans. There are 5 dragon types that appear so. So there's a real chance this time's dragon isn't just fighting. It might be fishing for a request, and Vale wants them to try convincing it first before they even think about defeating it. Because some dragons are friendly and actually understand them. But that won't matter until they meet the dragon face to face. So win or lose, they've got to see it in person first. Felix nodded at the plan and told Vale, "Come back to the guild tomorrow. I'll take you straight to the dragon." Meanwhile, Gregory brought Vale back to the merchant guild, pushing him to prep the gear they'd need to take on that dragon. Vale shoved his things into a bag and tiptoed out like he could outrun the morning, before anyone woke up. Chiara stumbled out of her room, yawning like she'd just been dragged out of a dream, and Vale blinked in shock, because she was up way too early, until he realized she'd burned through most of her energy yesterday, so she crashed early too, though Hanan looked like the real casualty of exhaustion. Chiara spotted his giant luggage and asked where he was headed, but Vale panicked, blurted out some excuse about running errands, and bolted before she could even ask again. Then she just stood there, watching him disappear. Martina burst in with a frying pan in her hand, peeking around the corner, and snapped that Vale's behavior looked wildly suspicious. They couldn't shake the feeling he was hiding something, and they couldn't stop wondering if he'd met a girl. Hainan had barely opened her eyes when she felt something big unfolding, so she urged Vale to follow it. As soon as Vale touched down at the guild, they geared up and were ready to roll out, straight toward the dragon. He's freaking out that he bolted out too fast, but dragging the girls into the subjugation is pure danger. Everyone says those dragons are ferocious, brutal monsters. He swept his eyes across the team. Now it was packed with more faces than before. And while Felix didn't grumble because extra firepower was a welcome boost, something about it still felt seriously off. Based on what they had, the dragon should have been right around them. But no matter how hard they searched, they couldn't spot it yet. Gregory caught Vale scanning the room and leaned in, demanding to know what was wrong. Vale couldn't forget this place. This is the exact area you unlock in Asterisk Fantasy Farm Story after you clear the event. A treasure hunt where you scavenge all kinds of items, but this. Time to hunt down the dragon and snag Felix's special reward. Vale watched the adventurers charge into the forest without a clue. But he refused to repeat the same mistake. First, he had to scan everything around him. He couldn't shake the feeling this was tied to the same in-game event, until Hanan suddenly burst in from the side, snapping, "Did you notice something?" Vale froze when he spotted Hanan standing there, right alongside Chiara and Martina. Martina blurted an apology for tailing him after curiosity got the best of her. Chiara shot back a sharp comment about the subjugation, and Vale went silent, because staying quiet might keep everyone safe, so he finally apologized for scaring them. Hainan went off on Vale for keeping it secret, then snapped, "Do you even know about dragons?" And she told me the secret. Her knowledge didn't come from textbooks, it was handed down for generations. Unlike humans who can grow up slowly, they don't get that time. They learn to survive fast by inheriting the hard-won wisdom and experiences of everyone who came before them. Hainan glanced down at the ground Vale had been staring at, and she saw it, trees and grass crushed in a way that didn't make sense, like something enormous had just sprawled there, even if she couldn't say for sure it was a dragon. Hainan suddenly zeroed in on one terrifying possibility. A massive body had to be hiding somewhere out there, and he just couldn't shake that thought. She unleashed her plant control power and blasted open a whole new space. Once they closed the distance, it all went down, right there and exactly like that. They stumbled on a treasure chest, and suddenly everything felt like it was about to change. Chiara yanked open the chest and boom, there it was. An ultra-rare herb sitting inside, and it matched the game's spot down to the exact inch. They tore through the forest, hunting down every last hidden spot they could still find. And all they managed to find were treasure chests. Yet the dragon was nowhere to be seen, like it vanished off the face of the earth with no mercy. Martina couldn't shake the thought that it might have flown off, but there wasn't a single clue that anything that big had lifted into the sky. So if it was a dragon's doing, Vale figured it had to be using another tell. He snapped his fingers and stole everyone's attention, right on the spot. To sprint to the very last place his mind could think of. They pushed into a spot dominated by a giant tree, and when Hanan tilted her head up, she felt something watching. So she shot Vale a look for confirmation, and he can. Kiara confirmed, no doubt about it. There was a dragon, and then she spun her head around, desperate to spot it. Hainan teased her, warning that her twin mountains would shrink the more she spiraled. Then she snapped back. No way, those aren't even mountains anymore. They're basically oranges at this point. Chiara shot her a fierce glare, then pinched her cheeks hard for teasing her. After their loud noise hit the air, the girl peeked out from behind the tree like she was about to uncover a secret. She looked human at first glance, but then the horns, the sharp ears, and that dragon tail gave her away. Chiara blinked in shock, totally thrown off by what she'd just heard. And he snapped out a loud shout that startled the dragon and sent it reeling, and it drove her into a full-on sprint as she fled in terror. Haynes stormed in and started poking Chiara for getting the dragon to bolt, and Chiara shot back. I've never even seen a species like this before, so yeah, not my fault. As he tore after the dragon, Martina leaned in and demanded proof that the girl carried both dragon and human traits, and Vale immediately nodded in confirmation. She was dragon kin, one of the rare ones that can slip into a human form and still stay fully, undeniably a dragon. Martina couldn't believe it. Dragons could look just like her, like they were wearing her face. In this world, dragons aren't just monsters, their power made visible, so respected that whole countries worship them as gods. And that's exactly why Vale couldn't stop asking one burning question. Why was a dragon like her really here? The crew kept calling out for her, then they split up on the spot to track her down faster. The dragon crouched in the bushes, shaking hard, staring at the crowd and thinking, why are they hunting me? And today, of all days, so many humans showed up with weapons. Yeah, that's terrifying. She had to slip out before they tracked her down. She crawled through the dirt, clawing for freedom, anything to escape when she... Then she suddenly spotted two adventurers, arguing over how to track her down, right in front of her, and swung their weapon, carving through her defenses. She squealed in terror, and that single sound made them zero in on her. They're charging straight at her. She tries to sprint, but her legs freeze and won't move an inch. Just then a hand clamped onto her shoulder. Vale shot her a look, silently telling her to shut up and stay still. He swore he'd never spook her, and held out his hand like a lifeline. He told her he'd already heard her story once they finally got away from that place. She snatched his hand and dragged him straight to the spot where the three girls were waiting. The dragon jolted in shock, stumbled back then. But Vale rushed in with a promise, we won't hurt you. Martina and Chiara even dropped their voices to apologize, admitting they scared her and shouted too loud. That crying dragon looked completely stunned, then it quickly clocked the truth. These people weren't coming for harm at all. She staggered, fought to stay upright, and then crumpled to the ground. Seeming exhausted, Vale shoved the water into her hands and told her to take a drink right away. After he drank that water, her complexion looked absolutely radiant. It hit my tongue like nothing I'd ever tasted. Because it wasn't ordinary water at all, it came from a lake that spits out holy water. It's been ages since she's tasted water this damn good. But she frowned again before long. Vale leaned in and demanded to know what was wrong, but she screamed at them to stay back. She'd gone too long without food, and her energy drained to nothing. Martina dropped her bag to the floor, yanked out her lunch boxes, and stepped into her moment. This was when she finally got to shine. She packed a ton of lunch, and on top of that, she even tried her hand at the Angerai Vale taught her. When Chiara insisted on packing lunch, she had no clue what would happen next, but she sure didn't expect it to pay off like this. Martina swore lunch mattered, because once hunger hits, you'll have zero energy to keep going. She thrust a plate into Vale's hands, and he rushed to the dragon, shoving food into its mouth like he was fueling a nightmare. He shoved the plate into her hands, and she polished it off in a blink. So Martina dished out more, and she grabbed it with real gratitude. Chiara just sat there, stunned as the dragon tore into everything like it couldn't get enough. Vale slid another plate into her hands, and she gulped it down without a second thought, even swallowing the plate with it. Hainan leaned in and asked her, "Are you a water dragon?" Because she could judge the water's quality like it was nothing. The girl nodded hard, Simon the water dragon, and Vale wasted no time introducing himself along with his three companions. Once, water dragons are meant to haunt rivers and lakes, so he demanded to know why she was lurking in the deep dark of this forest. Turns out the spring Simon called home has dried up, so she's been hunting for a new place to live. Water dragons like her couldn't fully unleash their powers unless they were standing right by a pure, clean spring. That's why she was hiding out in the forest to recover. But the second hunger hit, she couldn't move, got spotted, and the whole place erupted into chaos. She's terrified of what's coming next, because they'll grab her alive and do unspeakable things, no doubt about it. And then Vale steps in and swears it'll all be okay. Since he already knows the adventurers and their leader, he'll step up and explain everything himself. He even asked her if she could keep her human form, because he was about to roll her into his group and unveil her to everyone. Simon broke down in even louder tears as he thanked them again and again. While he'd heard most dragons roared with bold personalities, Simon somehow felt like the complete opposite. The girls gripped her hands and marched her back to the others, swearing everything was going to be okay. The second they stepped in, Vale blurted, "Gregory," like it couldn't wait. He spun around and clocked the girls, who had slid in ahead of everyone else's notice. Vale scanned the area, and sure enough, the other adventurers had piled in too. He was about to tell Gregory about the dragon sighting, but Gregory snapped, cutting him off mid-sentence. They finally cracked what the rumors mean, and now they're ready to hunt it down for real. Hearing his words, Simon's fear exploded, and she started crying. Suddenly, the ground jolted under their feet, and a giant serpent burst up from the ground like it had been waiting to strike. Felix jabbed at it and told Vale, "That's us." Turns out that giant serpent got mistaken for a dragon, and they had to slam it down like the nightmare it was. But the other adventurers showed up totally unprepared, chasing thrills instead of fighting. And the moment they saw that dragon, terror hit them like a brick wall. Panic snapped in. An archer loosed an arrow at the serpent, but the shot was so weak it couldn't even bite through its scales. The serpent let out a deep, vicious growl like it knew. This was only going to provoke it even more. One of the adventurers crumbled in pure fear, and Chiara's girls, standing shoulder to shoulder, barred the way as they stepped right in front. Hainan unleashed her powers and forced plants to burst up from the ground like they were alive and hungry. Chiara ripped open the sky with a brutal magic attack. But it doesn't look like it's doing much, because fighting here is a nightmare. The space is so tight and packed with people that if it lets loose that poison, everyone's going down in seconds. Vale slipped a seed straight into his sword and slammed the serpent to grab its attention. Now that the spotlight finally locks onto him, he bolted into the distance so the serpent would chase him instead. Him acting as the bait all by himself. Simon trailed right behind Gregory, keeping pace as they pushed forward. They pulled together the crew's adventures, ready to step in and back up Vale. Vale baited the giant serpent into an open arena, and the chase was about to explode. He drove his sword in to force plants to erupt, shooting him up until he hung from a branch. The serpent slithered right after him as he climbed up. But they'll spring right back down like, "Let's go." He let the plants he raised wrap around the branch, trapping the serpent. As soon as he hit the ground, he set his sights on its head and went straight for the kill. But the serpent snapped its way loose and burst free. He broke free and dashed straight at Vale, right as the serpent was about to slam into him. Samon burst out from behind the tree and slammed the serpent's head down. One step just wouldn't cut it. She snapped another kick into the head with her other foot. Then the serpent finally crumpled to the ground. She instantly flinched as she clocked every eye on her. Vale strode up to Simon and thanked her for the help, and Simon lit up like she'd won the whole world. She was terrified her powers would fail in this form, but somehow they still clicked, and that relief hit hard. Vale couldn't stop wondering how insanely strong she'd be if she ever broke free from the restraints. Felix declared that the giant serpent had finally been slain, and Vale fought to make them understand dragons were real. Simon, the same one who helped them take down the serpent, was proof. Everyone was stunned, even Gregory. Simon quickly blurted out that she didn't attack at all. She was just starving and couldn't even walk, so she'd been resting. Feeling the adventurers, cold stares bore into him. She cowered behind her veil, trembling with fear. Her fear instantly evaporated when an adventurer stepped in, grinning, and praised her for being totally badass. He thanked her for helping his friends, and it's like the whole world just finally started giving her the credit she deserves. Closing in on her and drenching her in praise, they finally tore their way back to the guild. They threw a wild celebration after crushing the giant serpent and sealing their victory. The adventurers clinked cups and downed drinks together, and Simon watched them like a hawk, eyes locked with pure curiosity. This was her first time around humans, so she peppered them with non-stop questions, about their weapons, their dances, and every wild little thing that caught her eye. She stared at everything like it was the first day of life, wide-eyed, amazed, and totally taken by the world. Martina, sitting right beside Vale, leaned in and asked if he was used to situations like this, because this was his first time in a place like this, even though he'd already survived plenty of formal dinner parties. Right when Gregory and Vale were talking, Gregory cut in and slapped him with a sincere thanks, praising all the hard work he'd been putting in. Vale couldn't stop himself from staring at the corner. Was it really okay for the star of the day to be stuck out of sight like that? Then Vale snapped, asking if he'd done anything honorable enough to deserve that spotlight. And Gregory couldn't believe what was coming out of his mouth. He had just saved this country's future, and Vale flinched with embarrassment. But Gregory only let out a heavy sigh, like he genuinely had no clue. And it's not just the town he saved. This is bigger than that because it's more than he ever even imagined. And Simone, trapped and struggling out in the forest, was the reason they could face everyone with a smile no matter what. So yeah, Vale decided to stride over and say hello to Gregory's table. A drunken Felix stumbled up and greeted them with a sloppy, clouded grin. You know that massive banquet everyone's buzzing about, happening the day after tomorrow? The kind that shows up like clockwork every 6 months. Gregory scratched the back of his head and told me it wasn't the banquet that pulled people in. It was the morning market. A full-on festival with extra street vendors packed like it was a holiday. He pushed Vale to set up his own stall too, because this was the kind of chance that could change everything. Once Vale agreed, Gregory leaned in and told him, "You're good. Jennifer will handle the whole application, and when you show up tomorrow, just ask me for the details." After that, Gregory dialed Martina and grilled her about something, while everyone else kicked back, already planning a strategy meeting the moment they got home. They invited Simone to join them. Simone wanted to go so badly, but first she had to find a new place to live. Chiara and Hanan said they already found one, with clean water and plenty of room for a water dragon, and it'd be totally fine even if she stayed there. Both of them spun toward Vale, and he swept Simone into the moment, inviting her along because he couldn't wait to show her the place he had in mind. By the time they finally reached the underground lake, night had already swallowed the world. Vale leaned in and told her the water she'd just gulped down wasn't from anywhere else. It came straight from right there. Simone had moved her life around a dozen times, but she'd never stepped into a place this breathtaking. As she spun toward Vale to ask for permission to stay, Vale beat her to it. He already nodded yes, because he knew she didn't just want to stay, she wanted to live in that lake. It was so painfully obvious that even a stranger couldn't miss it. Simone hesitated and asked if it was truly okay for her to stay. Then Vale stepped in and promised her everything was fine. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she poured her gratitude onto Vale, and when Hanan saw how drained she looked, he urged her to slip into the lake and finally unwind. Simone started untying her dress as Chiara threw her staff up and shoved Vale's eyes shut in pure panic. She let out a heavy sigh, shocked that not a single person even raised an objection as Simone stripped right in front of everyone. Simone burst into the lake with a grin, submerging herself in pure bliss. Lake stayed under and didn't resurface even after a few whole minutes. The more time passed, the more dread crept in, and everyone started picturing the absolute worst possibilities. There's no way a water dragon could have drowned, right? And it didn't help that Hainan kept pushing this wild idea about a giant underwater monster. Because yeah, it's weird they still hadn't seen her swim up. So Vale plunged into the lake to call for her. He watched bubbles rise in front of him, then the others demanded, "Is she here?" Right on cue, Simone burst up out of the water in her dragon form. Grinning to himself, he basked in how incredible that water felt on his skin. Chiara let out a laugh, still shocked that Simone is a dragon, because the way she's having fun makes it feel totally impossible. Samon's cheeks flared with embarrassment as their stares pinned her in place, because no matter how she looked like a dragon, the same old Samon was still burning inside. Vale couldn't stop smiling because she finally loved the lake. Simone thanked them too, and even in her dragon form, she still couldn't stop being a total crybaby. The very next morning, Vale strode up to the woodmen, slapped on a grateful smile, and thanked them for standing watch all night as their guards. He's heading out to harvest fresh vegetables so he can prep veggies, medicinal herbs, and flowers for the morning market. And this time, everyone jumps in together. Now that he's finally got more friends, he has to start handing out roles. So he sprints over to his tiny farm and spots Martina there, sighing like it hurts. When he greeted her and pointed out she was early, her eyes widened in shock, because she'd woken up way earlier than usual. Vale caught her drifting off and reaching for an underripe tomato, so he stopped her before she picked it too early. Martina blurted out an apology anyway, even though it was an honest mistake. She fretted that a few she'd grabbed were probably still green, but Vale flashed a calm smile and told her it was totally fine. They could just spot the unripe ones and pull them out, seeing Martina's worried face. Then Vale couldn't stop himself. He had to ask if something went down because she looked wrecked right after the party, and he was terrified something bad had happened. Gregory leaned in and asked her straight up if she would. She wanted to cook for the banquet yesterday, and she promised she'd give her answer today. But now she's stuck in doubt, not sure she should accept it while she's still at her best, so Vale pushed her to say yes. Seriously, her cooking is the best on earth, so there's zero chance anyone won't love it, and Martina turned to him and thanked him. But cooking's just her hobby, and deep down she doubts she'll ever be good enough to pull it off for real. He and everyone else bring their own special skills to the table, and that's exactly why they're so incredible. While she's still got a ton to learn, both as an adventurer and as a chef. Vale immediately shot that down, insisting her cooking is actually really delicious, and she's been helping him out. Like she was helping him connect with everyone. Then when he got kicked out, he braced for a life of total solitude. But she stayed right there, cooking him mouth-watering meals and refusing to leave. Thanks to her, he finally gets to live his days in peace, smiling all the way. So yeah, she needs to trust herself more, because it's these exact moments and lessons that shape who she truly becomes. Just as Vale dug through the box, he spotted that one tomato gone overripe and yanked it out fast. Martina laced her fingers with his, gripping his hand tight. He's out here claiming he's like that too, sweet, humble, and kind. But she can't help getting jealous sometimes because he's kind to absolutely everyone. The woodman leaned in with warm, gentle smiles, like he was cheering you on while you watched this video. Just then Hanan burst in, smiling and greeting them both, while the woodman from behind lunged forward, trying to drag her back like, let them have their moment. She only wanted to help, no matter what they were doing, until she caught them holding hands. She swung around to leave them to their own business, but Martina stepped in front of her and demanded her help, checking the ripe vegetables. After that, she started cooking up a plan, drafting ideas for a party recipe like it was her next big move. That sounds like a blast? So yeah, Hainan's stepping in for sure. And while he's on watch, Vale's out there grabbing the tastiest vegetables she can find. The day the morning market rolled in and the banquet finally arrived was here at last. Vale yanked a cart packed to the brim with fresh vegetables, hauling it forward like every step mattered. They rolled up to the stall's spot with Hainan and Simon, and the crowd everywhere around them made it feel like the perfect prime location. Maybe Gregory was trying to impress them. He didn't just hand over a participation card, he nailed it by pointing them to the shop's location, too, like it was perfectly meant for them. They're just watching people sweep past left and right, and even with all those folks flooding the road early in the morning, not a single customer is turning their way. This feels more like a festival than a normal market. And yeah, I bet you're wondering why it's only the three of them. Martina and Chiara are going to hustle in the kitchen for the banquet, so the three of them push through together until they finally link up again. Timid Simone is going to push herself to the max. No shrinking back, no hiding. Because the lake's power lets her conceal her horns, so nobody has to spot them, even if her tail keeps wagging like it's yelling, surprise. Vale had already set up a street stall with Martina and Chiara before, so they trusted him with the prep this time. Good, because Hanan was dying to know how they pulled in customers back then. They let customers sample the veggies, and his acquaintances jumped in to help too. Then Martina and Chiara's outfits stole the spotlight and pulled in a whole crowd. Hainan jutted his finger at the nearby stall where two women rocked pretty revealing outfits and asked if he meant stuff like that, and she instantly hesitated, worried it just wouldn't suit her. Oh wait, it's Simone. Her wild style and total pull can rake in tons of customers fast, because she's the most stylish and influential of them all, and yeah, she's packing the kind of confidence that turns heads instantly. Yep, it's true, but that's not the point. Vale's talking about an apron and Hanan's crushed, what a complete waste. With Chiara's build, that outfit never stood a chance. It just didn't fit her style at all. Right then, the morning bell slammed through the air, kicking off the morning market as the day ignites. Simone clocked Vale's trembling hand and wondered if he was nervous too. Yeah, that's right. Lately, he's been dumping them at wholesale for the Rimal Trading Company. But he can't shake the fear that those customers might not even bother picking them up. Right then, the man he'd helped earlier stormed up to their stall and demanded, loudly, 3 vegetables for each of them. Vale spotted him right away and let out a relieved smile. His face looked way healthier now. Turns out, ever since that day, he started cooking his own meals, and it shows. He's doing way better than before. He always heads to the Rimal Trading Company for his vegetables, and when Jennifer told him they were setting up a stall at the morning market, he bolted over to thank them for saving him back then and grab some fresh goodies, because he can't wait to chow down on healthy, delicious food made with their veggies. Vale beamed when he heard it and swore he'd do his absolute best. Hainan snatched up a tomato, spun to face the crowd, and urged them to buy it, claiming the vegetables got a heartbreakingly touching backstory. Simone backed her up too, even if she was still a little shy. Crowds swarmed around them, stunned by how fresh and top-notch those veggies were for rock-bottom prices. And yeah, people snapped them up instantly. They even sold medicinal herbs too. Meanwhile, Chiara and Martina, plus the woodman hauling ingredients, wove through the packed morning market, and Chiara couldn't stop worrying whether Vale and the others could handle the crowd. If Martina's right, their shop has to be close right where they are. So they rushed to go visit, and then bam, that insanely long line had everyone staring in shock. Hainan clocked them instantly and shouted for help, because Simone was seconds away from snapping, and the two nodded in agreement. Then, and kept busting at the shop until every last item was gone. Vale shot the approaching customers an apology. Every single one of their goods was already gone, and the shelves emptied faster than last time, even with fresh stock brought in. Some repeat customers even showed up again. And honestly, that's huge, because these guys are blowing up and getting wildly popular. Right then, Seraphine swept in, grinning because everyone looked totally fine. Chiara's eyes went wide seeing her mom, and she blurted, "What are you doing here?" Because Jennifer had messaged her last night through her familiar. Even so, she can't help but notice how bravely her daughter is holding her own tomorrow morning at the market. Vale couldn't believe it, these two actually knew each other. Only Seraphine was the quiet type, she'd once been Vale's student. Kyra thought she was buried in work, so why was she standing here? Turns out Seraphine had a big meeting at the school this afternoon, but she still came to check on how her sweet Kyra was really doing with her precious friends. Martina lifted her hand and said they got along insanely well. Chiara went bright red and yanked them along to clean, while Seraphine watched with a warm, knowing smile. Even if she insists she can laugh again, doesn't that still feel like a lie? She doesn't know who Chiara inherited it from, because ever since she was a kid, that girl struggled to click with people. Back then, Chiara would cling to her like glue, and she wouldn't let go. But somewhere along the way, they drifted farther and farther apart. She's proud her child has grown independent, yet that pride comes with a sharp, lonely ache. When she saw how much Chiara had grown, it hit her like a spark. Chiara had found her true home, the kind where she blooms, and yeah, she even made friends. Right then, Vale leaned in and told her the seed of Oron had blossomed beautifully. Turns out it's the green-haired girl, Hanan. He beckoned Hainan over and introduced her to Seraphine, Chiara's mother, the very person who'd made their meeting possible. Hainan couldn't believe it when she learned Seraphine was the one who gave Chiara life. That mysterious erotic lady looks a lot like Chiara, but she oozes that grown-up heat Chiara could never pull off. Then Chiara heard every word, stormed up, and fixed her with a chilling, menacing glare. Aren't they just bursting with life? Later that day, Martina finally slammed the last touches on the banquet food, stacking up veggie delicacies and sizzling fish dishes. Chiara hauled the cooking fish straight from the lake, and when you saw it, your mouth practically started watering. Before, her fishing was every bit as sharp as Vale's, but then Chiara leveled up fast and the difference showed instantly. She flashed a proud smile like she'd just proven a point, and yeah, this was only the start. Simone couldn't stop wondering if she'd gotten better, until every time she showed up in a veil for those fishing dates, Chiara clocked her with a brutal glare. Who dared to dispute her words? That's straight up not true. They just went out to gather food, and the whole time bickering was already cracking the air. Saying that, Jennifer strode over, shot them an apology for the interruption, and warned them the banquet would start any minute. She jabbed a finger at the stage and told them, "The dancers are coming." Vale spotted the bottle in her grip and the faint wobble in her voice. The banquet hadn't even kicked off yet, and she was already drinking. As soon as the crowd started clapping, Gregory burst onto the stage. Then he thanked everyone for showing up, saying it was their support that made today's morning market a massive success. To celebrate, he declared the grand banquet officially underway, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Then he snapped, "Jennifer, come here." She jumped in surprise, then hurriedly snatched up some food. She had to bolt right now. If she didn't, she wouldn't get to eat. Martina waved at her, locked eyes with Vale, and then, did she seriously just say the real beginning of the festival starts now? Before anyone could even ask what that meant, they figured it out fast. A hungry crowd closed in, staring at the food like it was treasure. Did the news of that morning market hit spread already? The crowd demanded food, so Martina snapped into action and started handing it out right away. Could this be the real beginning Jennifer was warning her about? Anyway, Martina grabbed a bunch of vegetables and scooped them up in a hurry. He grabbed the plates piled with veggies and fish and started passing them out to everyone standing in line. A girl dropped by and grilled her on one thing, what sauce she uses for the fish. She explained it's a slow-stewed, flame tomato sauce, cooked low and gentle, perfect for both fish and meat. The girl couldn't shake that street-side flavor once she'd tasted it, and now she's ecstatic to get it again. So when Martina finally thanked her, she was completely flustered. Everyone dug in and laughed. Those veggies weren't just good. They were bursting with flavor thanks to the careful cooking, and the food tasted so amazing they could have eaten it every single day. Vale whipped around to Martina and asked, "I told you, did I?" Then he leaned in. Martina made the most delicious food in the whole world, and her smile lit up with pure joy. As the night stretched on, more and more people kept crowding in to eat until there was barely anything left on the table. And even Chiara's extra food got wiped out too. Now the rest of the food was theirs. Hanan yanked Martina's apron and demanded one more plate, like she couldn't wait another second. Dirk crouched in the alley, eyes locked on them with a mean, unblinking glare. No way, Vale actually sells vegetables. Like, what kind of crazy twist is that? He humiliated him the other day, and it looks like Seraphine's got a soft spot for him too. So what was this even all about, really? People are probably getting played. There's no way those veggies taste good, so bet they're downright disgusting. And once he's got his nerve, he'll start spreading rumors like wildfire. Right then, Hanan shot into view in front of him, and she caught him glaring at them with that resentful look he'd been stuck on for ages, and demanded to know who he was, or what the heck he wanted from Vale and the others. Seeing that Dirk wouldn't answer, at the end, she figured he only wanted to chow down, so she grabbed the plate he asked for, the same one she'd pushed Martina for earlier. Dirk would never touch that trash, but Hainan snapped at him, insisting he hated vegetables. To shut her down for good, he snatched up a skewer of vegetables and tore into it like it was pure proof. He couldn't believe how insanely delicious it was. His hands won't stop moving. Right then, Vale burst into the alley and shouted Hanan's name. The second Dirk heard him, he snapped his head away and swore the food tasted disgusting. Vale sprinted straight toward Hanan. She asked if I was okay and whether Dirk had done anything, and I nodded right away, because yeah, I was fine, but that Dirk, he wasn't telling the truth. Vale blinked, confused, then stared at the empty plate sitting in her hands. So where the heck was the food, and did Dirk just show up for nothing? They sprinted back to where the others were, right in the middle of everything. Hainan finally apologized for showing up late and snapping them into worry. She was mostly hyping up the veggies, while everyone threw everything they had into it. Martina's dream burned bright. Keep feeding even more people with fresh vegetables, so they'll have to push beyond their current farm space and grow a whole spread of crops, and Vale immediately nodded along. He's also gearing up to raise his own livestock, chickens and goats included. Votes, when he's with everyone, he can't stop himself, because the ideas and plans just won't run out. Like they warned, the underground farm's expansion kicked off right away. Vale then asked Simon and Hanan if the harvesting was finished, and it was. Hanan threw her arm out in a long stretch, because harvesting wiped you out fast. Honestly, the grind is what makes farming worth it. And now that she's been handed the reins to run the place, she's about to grow a whole garden's worth of top-notch vegetables. Simon swore she'd help too, just drop the livestock on her when they arrive. All right, that's got Hanan moving. She's got to carve out a breeding space as well. Honestly, Vale was beyond grateful they were here, because they didn't just help with farming, they had his back with all the other stuff too. The woodman loomed behind them with downcast faces, like he was silently begging for praise too. So Vale told them, "You're a huge help too," and their faces lit up like fireworks. Right then, Martina and Chiara came back from their morning dungeon run, stepping in like they'd already survived something huge. They finally spotted a way forward, then the path slammed shut into a dead end. They should have taken the right road from the start. What a disaster. They totally mistook it for the left, but next time they'll rip through the route on the right. Martina, an apprentice adventurer, kicks off her exploration in the morning, and Chiara tags along. She sometimes shows up at the Royal Academy to train as a magician. Together, they're the perfect duo. Vale just struck up new friendships, and life finally started feeling normal, until Martina almost forgot the real twist. That road was a dead end, but they stumbled on a rare, glittering gem. It won't help in battle, but you can cash it in for a huge amount. Since Vale was already heading to the Rimmel Trading Company to haggle about raising livestock next, he figured he might as well toss this gem in the deal while he's there. Chiara pitched the idea of using that money for a sweets party, and everyone jumped on board. Meanwhile, I couldn't stand the thought of bursting their bubble. But Jennifer says it's not even worth buying. At first, it looks like some rare mineral, but it's just an ordinary stone, and Simone's shoulders drop hard like, that can't be. So what about their sweets party? Jennifer felt sick for letting them down after they showed up with stars in their eyes, but Vale stepped in and swore, it's okay. He then pressed them for an answer. Did Gregory go out? Yeah, he's dealing with some trouble. Jennifer paused, then shot back, asking if they were all free after this. No big plans, right? And was she needing something? Jennifer couldn't stop smiling after hearing that, and it lit up her whole day. And waved them onto the carriage. She said she'd spill every detail on the ride. Inside the carriage, she stuffed them with sweets. Probably a bride before they start chewing them up to the bones. Still, all's well, because they actually enjoyed it. Jennifer shoved a glance to the window and told them, we're still hours away. Chiara immediately asked where they were headed, and Jennifer snapped back, to the forest of Eva Village. If it's about the company, Vale figures they must have been hired to deliver wood, and he catches on to everything insanely fast. Yep, the village was ordered to grab wood for the trading company, but the tree they counted on turned sick and slumped, losing all its strength, so it's useless now. Vale couldn't stop wondering what they'd build with the wood, and Jennifer laid it out. She said they were making a bridge, a massive one. A brand new bridge is under construction to link the Kingdom of Krentz with the neighboring Kingdom of Foster. And Martina already heard the job got delayed again and again because the Bayenne River keeps flooding. Still, once that bridge finally goes up, traveling between the cities will be a whole lot easier. Chiara acted like she already knew, saying that if they could build a bridge, it might finally open the door to real communication between countries that used to hate each other. Their old fight over land was more than 100 years ago, and now everything's changed. There's a peace treaty in place for trade. Because of the fights that happened back then, people still don't trust each other's countries. So today, you can't exactly call their relationship friendly. So we're gonna crack the distance problem between the two countries first, then crank up the exchanges and forge a real, strong bond. So Martina and Vale decided, no way are we letting this flop. They had to make it a total success. Jennifer's face was tense as she talked. Good news first. The two counties had agreed to split the construction costs, but now that it's finally time to start, disaster hits in the form of a wood problem, and no one knows if it's just nature or sabotage by people who don't trust their neighbors. Right now, the villagers are banding together to track down what's killing the trees and fix it. But no matter what they try, nothing's really working. If this is a plant problem, then we're not messing around. Hanan felt the moment had come for the dragon tree sword to finally step into the spotlight, and she swore it could do way more than just help them grow vegetables. Though Vale honestly couldn't say that with any real confidence. Now talk about the trees. This treehouse pops into existence thanks to a divine species, and here's the twist. It's not the dragon tree sword's power. That divine species can heal, but only inside the human body, and nobody knows yet if it can do a thing for the trees themselves. They're growing these veggies, and somehow it might be possible to cure the diseases in them. So if they can pull that off and even apply it to trees, that discovery would be absolutely massive. Even though Vale can't promise it'll work, he's still going to try and make it happen, right now. So yeah, she's going for it. Hanan knows plants like the back of her hand, so she'll do whatever she can to help them, and the others back her up too. Jennifer couldn't stop showing her gratitude. When we finally rolled into that seemingly peaceful village, everything about it felt too calm. They hopped off the carriage, and the fresh, crisp air hit them instantly, plus the view outside was gorgeous. Jennifer hustled everyone to the timber storage facility in the back, because the mayor was almost certainly waiting there. There, Gregory snatched a chunk of wood from the storage and punched the door, then slammed it so hard it splintered in seconds, breaking like glass. Hainan watched with panic in her chest, because this was way worse than she'd ever feared. Gregory snapped his head toward her, stunned beyond words. Wait, Hanan, if she's here then Vale's right behind her, so tell me, did they all show up here to help? Vale leaned in and demanded to know what they'd uncovered, but right now there's still nothing concrete. Just a chilling suspicion that this is some kind of disease. Gregory spun to the mayor and demanded to know how badly everything was wrecked, and the mayor's face twisted as he said the land around the village was wiped clean. Go deeper and they might stumble on a few trees, but the delivery was due in a week, so Gregory didn't have time to hunt them all one by one. The mayor's face bombed as she apologized, but Gregory shut it down fast, telling him to quit blaming himself and lift his head. Every villager wore the same grim, stone-faced look, like the whole village was hanging by a thread. And yeah, it was because their survival depends on it. They make their living by cutting down timber. Hainan leaned in and told Vale that, because trust me, this isn't just a little problem, it could turn into a huge, painful mess. The dragon tree sword has gone dark, and the blade keeps pulsing like it's alive. This is proof the disease didn't just happen. It was forced into existence, artificially inflicted. Gregory leaned in and demanded to know what she was talking about. And if anyone finally gave the answer, Vale snapped the dragon tree sword toward the wood pile in the storage and demanded everyone's eyes on it. That eerie glow is the dead giveaway. This disease wasn't natural at all, it was poison. This has to be the poison that insect monster carries. But the real nightmare is that those insect monsters don't even belong here. Maybe they brought you here on purpose. Or maybe they just pulled out the poison and hurled it everywhere. And honestly, monsters like that with poison this deadly don't come around often. He has no clue who did this, so first they're ripping through the forest to hunt the insect monsters down, then they'll wipe them out. Gregory agreed. He told them, let me handle the fight. Then he fired off a messenger to Felix to call in reinforcements, and now he needed the villagers on his side. As for the wood, he figured they could still get it done if they hauled it from deeper in the forest, so he snapped, start now. As they pushed deeper into the forest, the shadows seemed to swallow everything behind them. Vale couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The silence was way too unnatural. Normally birds, deer, raccoons, and all the other animals would be out there making noise, but not a single sound came from anywhere. The odds keep climbing that the culprit is that monster insect. At that exact moment, Martina gasped in shock and screamed as she spotted monstrous eggs perched on the trees. Gregory sized up the trees and decided they looked fine, so he ordered them to smash the eggs. Hanan cut him off. If there were eggs, then the insect that laid them had to be nearby, and just like that, it crawled out as if it knew she'd caught on. Gregory yanked out a knife like it could save him, but right before he could even make a move. Then bam! The monster let out a sudden, ear-splitting shriek, and every villager shot back in terror, screaming their lungs out because what even was that thing? It's nearly 3 meters long, and they've never ever seen anything like it. At the same time, Chiara clocked something was off and blew the whistle on it. This wasn't some ordinary insect monster. Letters made of magic were etched into its forehead, and whoever carved them can command these monsters like puppets. So that means someone out there is pulling the monster's strings. First, they had to wipe out the X. Chiara panicked, because casting spells that fast felt impossible, so Simone jumped in and told everyone to hand it over to her. Then she let out a heavy sigh. Right before she erupted into her dragon form. Gregory couldn't believe it. She could transform at will, no limits at all, and the lake's power had clearly breathed new life into her. Samon roared, and the sweet power surged through her, revving her up. Then she whipped her gaze toward that monster insect lurking in. Lunged forward to bite down, driving straight through its motion. Then, once it was utterly helpless, she dropped down to finish it. Wrench it free and slam that monster insect onto the ground. Hainan whooped as that monster crumpled from a single brutal hit, and Simone looked thrilled, tail still whipping behind her like she's shockingly feral in that form. Vale snapped around the moment. He heard the crawling getting closer. He blared the warning and snapped everyone into motion. Monsters were breaking out of the eggs, and even the larvae were gigantic. You can't wipe them out and crack the eggs at once, so they had to split their forces. Vale yanked the dragon tree sword free, thinking he could slice through the eggs and take down the trees with it. Bosch yanked his sword up, and a healing vine burst from the tip, shooting into the soil and taking root at once. Vines burst out and surged forward at a wild, reckless pace, and thick, clinging ivy wrapped around the tree and tightened around them, turning those eggs dull and ruined. Falling off, yeah, even those torn-up trees are healing back up. That ancient seed, Bosch, was a divine plant with a killer power. It could breathe life back into even the most battered, dying plants. That's how they crushed the tree problem, pure genius. Now waste no time and wipe out the larvae. With everyone swinging in together, they wiped out the monsters in a blink. At last, Chiara finally stopped sensing any more monsters. They wiped them all out. Then the whole village erupted into cheers because their home was finally saved. Gregory told the mayor, "Reinforcements are coming soon. Start hauling in wood now, and we'll make it in time." And the mayor burst into happy tears, so overwhelmed with relief that he couldn't stop thanking them. Vale could finally breathe easy, because they'd actually managed to help. The mayor demanded they rest up in the village tonight, and promised a massive party just for them. Vale clocked how silent Chiara had been this whole time, like her mind was stuck in a storm, and he snapped, "What's wrong?" But when she finally turned to him, worry flashed across her face. Because this timber site is supposed to be tightly run, she assumes someone would have thrown up a protective barrier to shield the trees from monsters. Yet she can't feel a single one. The magic barrier is finally shattered, so whoever did this had to be unbelievably skilled. As soon as he heard her words, Gregory knew. This had to be the Mist Witch meddling again. Vale didn't know much about her, but she still showed up in the game. And if one word could sum up her personality, it would be the worst. Lloyd, the knight, burst in to personally thank them for handling the whole problem. Gregory swallowed his pride and apologized for calling the knights on such short notice, claiming they were probably buried in royal assignments. Yet none of that was true, because Lloyd was honestly relieved there wasn't much to do. The moment the sun climbs up, they'll rush out to hunt down any monsters still standing. Then they'll finally let them deal with the rest. Then he whipped around to face Vale and Chiara, demanding to know why they weren't smiling after they finally wiped out that monster insect. It's because something's been gnawing at them and it won't let up. There's a real shot this whole mess was pulled off by the Mist Witch. The mist swirls and leaves one question hanging. Who is she? In the game, she pulls every kind of trick to stir up trouble, and the reason? Pure, twisted fun. She's the worst kind of kidnapper and prankster, the kind that laughs while everything spirals. And yeah, there'd be answers, because that mist fueling the riots in the neighboring country a few weeks back. If she loves whipping people into chaos, she can't ignore a case that's tied right to that country. Even so, she's really about to smash through that brutal barrier, and now we're screwed, because Hainan can't stop thinking about it. When he asks about that killer mist mage, Sakiara says she's one of the most powerful people on the planet, and if we get tangled up with someone like that, it's game over. Gregory's calling every last knight and mage together to hunt down the mastermind behind this incident and put an end to the chaos. Meanwhile, Lloyd thrust his hand toward Vale, and Vale's quick help paid off. Vale grabbed it tight, grateful to be useful, and Lloyd promised he'd report Vale's achievements straight to the royal family. Vale thanked him right then. Martina figured it'd be awesome if the whole kingdom finally got to meet him, so she pushed the idea, and Vale just scratched the back of his head, mortified. Then it hit him, wait. The royal family actually showed up for the divine appraisal ceremony, which meant they'd probably learn everything about his family. Vale hesitated for a beat, then spun back to Lloyd and blurted out what was really happening to him. Lloyd suddenly clocked the truth. This was really about Vale slipping out of the Orland house, and once it hit, he just knew. That's why he also showed up for the divine appraisal ceremony, and Lloyd didn't think the dragon tree sword would amount to much, until it blew him away with just how insanely good it was. Vale nodded in agreement. Yeah, the blade was breathtaking, but it wasn't built for real fights, so at his own home, nobody cared or even noticed it. After all, the House of Orland is famous for dominating the battlefield with pure military power. But this time, Lloyd was 100% sure, and he couldn't stop thanking his lucky stars. If anything else pops up, he'd ask for his help, so Vale didn't even blink before agreeing instantly and happily. A full week has passed since the chaos hit Eva Village, and thank the stars, nothing major has surfaced. Everything's been eerily quiet, and Vale practically exhaled with relief at the news. But Chiara couldn't shake the worry. She still didn't know how this tied to the Mist Witch. She's locked in constant worry about the mist. Maybe it's because we're both mages, and she's playing it far safer than anyone else. She hasn't let her guard down a single second since they crawled back to the treehouse. Girls watched as she let out yet another heavy sigh. Then Vale slid in beside her. He gets why she's worried, but she's overworking herself again. She has to be wiped out. Chiara insists she's fine, but Vale barrels right past it anyway. He knows she's got everyone's backs. He might not talk them into anything, but if it's a fight, she can trust his strength. Chiara scoffed, twisting her hair like she couldn't believe it. Enough already. He should be doing this kind of thing for Martina, not her. Vale blinked, thrown off by why Martina had suddenly been dragged into it. But Chiara cut in fast, told him she was totally fine, and basically said, "Stop being so damn nice to everyone. If they ditch you, don't come whining to me." She claimed she didn't care, yet the way she said it made it clear she did asterisk. Because she's one of his important friends, so could she at least get him to stop letting himself worry? Chiara opened her mouth, then stopped herself and let out yet another sigh. Seriously, this guy's dense. All right, that's it. They should drop everything and go deliver the vegetables. They swung by the Rimmel Trading Company, handled their business, and walked out with Jennifer thanking them for everything from today. Then they hit the Oregon Pavilion for lunch while they were still there, which is also Chiara's favorite little shop. Suddenly, a kid barreled into Chiara, and they both crashed to the ground. Chiara winced through the pain and snapped at him to watch where he's running in the city. He just snapped that she was an idiot and bolted out of there, calling it fast. Chiara was fuming, and you've gotta wonder, did that kid just call her a shrimp? Right then, a chef in a uniform shouted at them from far away, screaming for them to catch that kid as he snatched bread from their shop. So tell me, is a kid that young really a thief? So yeah, if they're going to follow him right now, Kara's about to snatch him up for real. Just wait, now they're sprinting after him, and there's no stopping them. The kid vaults over the wall, then sprints off again like they're racing fate itself. They finally caught up to him, and then he vanished, nowhere to be seen, even though he was right there under the table. I could hear Mom snapping, "Use your eyes." Kiara's face twisted with menace as she promised to pelt him with fireballs. Then she smirked and said Simone could catch him by turning into her dragon form, but Vale snapped back that if they did, the entire town would get wiped out. Hainan cut in right then, laughing like they were all clueless, and then he shrugged. "Stop chasing me, use your brains." He snatched bread from the shop, right? So yeah, he wasn't just hungry, he was desperate. So they need to reel him in by baiting him with food. They'll stack fruits along the road to tempt him, then they'll spring a trap on the path ahead. So tell me, are they hunting a mouse or setting up to catch him? And yeah, their plan totally worked, at least mostly. Either way, they snagged that lively dragon without a hitch, mission cleared. And while everyone was still messing around, Martina spotted the kid hiding under the table. Shoot, he can't move fast enough to escape. No way they're about to catch him. Martina dropped into a crouch. She ruffled his hair and patted his head, convinced he must have had his reasons since his desperation was obvious. But she also knew stealing and using abusive words still weren't okay. As long as he apologizes to everyone the right way, she'll tag along too, so he won't feel scared. When they came back, and that chef had already filled Gregory in on every single detail. With Martina and Chiara flanking him, the kids quickly stepped forward and blurted out apologies. Suddenly, the chef snapped his wrist in a rough, grabbing grip. Gregory started accusing him of shoplifting, and Vale knew the vigilantes were about to get a report. So she asked what shoplifter even meant, and it was Gregory who finally spelled it out. For what feels like forever, thefts and robberies have been exploding nonstop, episode after episode. The kid protested hard. Yeah, he admitted he'd snatched the bread, but this was his first time ever doing it, not a habit. The chef didn't buy a word, and she clamped down on his wrist even tighter. Others lunged to stop him from going after the kid, but he wouldn't budge an inch, not for a second. So Martina jumped in and shoved him back with everything she had. Before they even arrived, the kid warned them. He'd trekked all the way from Nathan Village alone, no company, no help, just pure drive. When the chef heard that, he was stunned that someone from a far-off village made the journey, and on foot, too. Even if you cram it into a horse-drawn carriage, it still takes hours just to get here. Martina grabbed the kid by the shoulders and told him, "You finally made it here this morning, but you've got no money." Then she explained how he was so starving he ended up stealing bread, and the moment the words landed, the kid clenched his fists tight. He put his hands down, bowed hard to apologize, and the chef let out a heavy sigh, then grudgingly agreed to let it slide for now, but he better never pull that kind of stunt again. From what I can tell, he doesn't look like the guy who's tied to any of those earlier cases. Meanwhile, way in the back, Gregory looked totally lost in thought. Because if it's Nathan Village, then, is he somehow thinking of a pre-surgical Sergia plan? Ciergo snapped her head toward him, stunned, then demanded how he could possibly know that. Gregory didn't just grow up wondering, he actually knew his dad, Tyler. He trusted him for work again and again, and even bumped into Sergio when he was just a baby. He dropped into a crouch to meet Sergio's eyes and demanded to know why he'd come all this way by himself. Because he couldn't fathom how Tyler, of all people, could leave his precious son outside the village like that. Tears welled up in Sergio's eyes as he confessed that his dad had ordered him to run for his life, and then begged them to help him save their village. They dragged him back to the Rimal Trading Company, and the second he hit the place, exhaustion knocked him out cold. So Jennifer pulled the blanket up and demanded, "Why did Sergio come all the way here from a village so far away?" What village? He swore strangers stormed in and attacked, and they shoved him to run before anyone spotted him. He escaped, but his dad and everyone else in the village got hauled away and captured. Gregory asked the villagers if they were okay, but Sergio was too terrified to answer. He scrambled to beg for help along the way, and not a single person believed him. Hearing their story, Jennifer's heart twisted. Too much to dump on a kid all alone, and Gregory nodded, patting the sleeping Sergio's head as if to say, "You made it this far, and that takes real guts." Nathan's village has kept the nation fed for generations. This farming settlement runs one of the country's biggest farms, and most villagers spend their days hauling their crops straight to the market. Vale stared at that calm little village and couldn't shake the feeling something was going on, especially with Nathan out there. Even he knew the name somehow. Still, it was famous for farming, at least that's what his head claimed from a memory he shouldn't mention. So yeah, he swallowed the truth and just nodded along. Turns out they had zero clue who hit the village. Normally they'd fire off a messenger, but they didn't even have that option. So everyone locked eyes, read the same terrifying thought, and nodded in perfect sync. Gregory demanded if they were really sure, and Vale nodded like, yeah, they'll have to go there themselves. So they'd split in the morning and meet up there. Gregory shoved a map into his hands, telling him to march to the village with Sergio and pull in a few adventurers so everything was set and ready. Vale nodded until he suddenly remembered something. Turns out there's one thing he's been dying to borrow. The very next day, Vale's crew piled into a carriage and rode out. Chiara couldn't believe they ended up borrowing horses. If he'd just said the word, Simone could have yanked the cart herself in her dragon form. But then again, what kind of carriage would that even make? A dragon carriage, honestly. That's sick. Meanwhile, Martina's jaw drops. Vale actually knows how to drive a carriage. And it turns out he's been practicing with Gregory all along because he's got big plans. When he's ready, he wants to raise horses on the farm too. One more thing's gnawing at him. He told them to pull out the map and check Nathan Village. Isn't that incident near Eva Village the one that happened just recently? Could this be linked to the same people behind it? Vale wasn't sure, but one thing's clear. They've got to stay even more on guard. After hours of pounding the road, they finally tore up to Nathan Village, but they couldn't sense a single soul anywhere. Things are messier than they ever expected. Gregory and the rest who were supposed to race ahead are missing too. Chiara fired off a detection spell, then snapped to them that a massive crowd was waiting just up ahead. They ditched the wagon by the entrance and pushed into the village, and it's downright eerie. No one's out here at all, not at this hour. Chiara even steps inside and still can't pick up a single trace of life hiding behind those walls. Up ahead the farm looms, massive, stretching as far as the eye can see. And the farm's packed with every kind of vegetable you can imagine. Running a place like this is straight up amazing. Vale's eyes snap to the eggplants, already bursting with ripeness, ready to be harvested. The crops are sitting there, ripe for the taking, yet not a single person's come to harvest them. The whole field looks abandoned, like nobody's touched it in days. So where the heck did all the villagers disappear to? Chiara warned everyone that her reaction would hit harder, so she demanded someone stay close by. Simone caught snippets of voices ahead and snapped to the group, telling them people were waiting just up the way. Vale snapped, sit down, shush. While Martina, right up front, clocked the armed men in the crowd, they had to be the same attackers from the village, just like Sergio warned. Baldy leaned in and grilled his buddy. Did you get every single villager? And the buddy nodded back, yeah, I got them all. That was all the proof they needed. These guys really do hit the village. But they don't move like trained soldiers, and Kara swore they looked more like bandits until she spotted the armor. And if they're this well prepared, then someone had to be paying them. More people rush in to spill the news and tell him everything. They tell the newcomers that over 10 search parties are already hunting them, so it's only a ticking clock before they get caught. Nobody saw the Rimal crew coming, and honestly, how the hell did they even track them down? So if they stay far enough from the village, they can just run the plan. No problems, no alarms. As soon as they took off, Vale's crew hustled after them, trailing right behind. One of the men yanked the door open with a brutal kick, like it was just another lock to crack. Snuck into the place, and dragged out one of the villagers they'd been keeping locked up inside. Baldy slammed Tyler, a villager, to the ground. Now tell me, where's the fun in stopping there? Tyler even offered to sacrifice himself if it meant the others could go free. Baldy shoved a torch into his hands and laid out two brutal options. Burn the shed where everyone was, or light up the fields stretched out ahead. Tyler couldn't possibly pull this off, so tell me, why are they even putting him through this in the first place? They didn't care about the why. Someone just ordered them to torch every field in this village. And as Chiara realized it, she knew the real strings were being pulled by someone hiding in the shadows. They had to cut them off fast, so Vale stepped in and stopped her. Their enemies pulled out guns, and the villagers could get torn apart, so they had to move in the exact right order, and that's when Hainan revealed his plan. Baldy shoved a gun to Tyler's head and barked at him to hurry up. The villagers leaned in and told Tyler, "Don't worry, nothing to fear." If those fields caught fire, the whole nation's food supply would be in danger, and still, Tyler couldn't imagine hurting the very people who lived beside him. With shaking hands, he clutched the torch and charged straight for the field. Right then, vines shot out of nowhere and wrapped tight around the men and their guns. It's Hanen's going off. Baldy yanked out a knife and tried to slash them off, but the blades bounced off, because Chiara's magic had reinforced everything. She shoved Tyler into the tall grass, and then unleashed her magic like a storm. Magic crackled in the air. Meanwhile, Martina and Vale tiptoed into the storage, struck the guard hard in the head, and dropped him into a deep, instant unconsciousness. They showed up to rescue the villagers, but for now they've got to stay put, because what's coming next is going to blow their minds. More armed men crashed in, but even with all those guns, they couldn't do a thing, because right there, everything fell apart. When Simone, in her dragon form, finally tore the disguise away and revealed herself. So the moment things turn ugly, every last one of them bolts in terror. There's no way they can win this. Sure, they're chasing money, but they're not willing to bleed for it. Baldy clicked his tongue. No way could they just back out like that. The guy beside him pushed him to retreat, swearing that the dragon would gobble the villagers either way. Let it leave first, he argued. Then they'll come back and burn the fields once it's gone. For now, they need to pull back, just for the moment. Simone snapped back into her human form and asked, "So, how was my roar?" Hainan burst out that it sounded wildly intense, and Simone couldn't help but giggle, shy but glowing. Vale lit up with praise for everyone, and the villagers were safe too. Then the moment the commotion settled, they sprinted straight to Tyler, demanding to know if he was okay. Hainan threw out an apology, admitting they'd wrecked part of their crops. Those veggies were definitely trustworthy, packed with energy, because someone tended them with real care. Still, Tyler couldn't help but wonder how they blitzed all the way to their village. Vale was seconds away from spilling the whole story. Sergio comes sprinting in just to hug his dad, and Vale keeps talking, saying Sergio reached out to them the second he realized what was going on. Tyler patted Sergio on the head, jaw tight with regret that he couldn't deliver the full message in time. Yet somehow, Sergio still absolutely crushed it. Gregory showed up right then, grinning and praising him for raising such a fine son, because it's been ages since they last saw each other. Tyler thanked him for always stepping in and helping them out. Martina grilled Gregory, asking if they were all right because she'd heard they were being hunted. Turns out they were fine. They caught every pursuer, then even hauled in the ones who showed up later, handing them all straight over to the Knight's order. And then, boom, one of them finally confessed a massive truth. The attack on Eva Village wasn't random at all, because they were the ones who unleashed those monsters there. He was desperate to get answers, but the man they'd caught clammed up. No words, no matter how hard he might have tried to speak, and Karen already knew exactly what that silence meant. No way those guys had magic runes carved into their own bodies. Yeah, that's exactly it. The second he tried to say the employer's name, he keeled over dead, like something erased him instantly. And if there's a person out there who can wield magic runes powerful enough to kill, they're the only ones who could have done this. It's the Mist, because with both the Eva and Nathan villages in the mix, their real play is to sabotage the nation's trust. If their diplomacy crumbles, trade goes down with it, and peace shatters too, so they've got to figure out where the Mist that is. Once they finally made it back to the treehouse, the whole vibe snapped into place. Vale jumped back onto the farm again, but this time he's got no one beside him because everyone's out there today. Martina dives into the dungeon, Chiara stays busy at the academy, and while they do that, Hanan and Simone hit the Merchants Guild. Seriously, it's been ages, but wait. This time, he's actually here alone for the first time. For now, he'll snatch a quick bite in the kitchen and keep moving. The moment he burst into the kitchen, shock hit him so hard he blurted out, gasping with. When he spotted Chiara sighing inside, his stomach dropped. This felt off. She never lets him off the hook like that. Then he saw it, the report she was supposed to submit, and demanded to know if anything had gone down at the academy. Chiara chewed her lip for a second, then snapped, "Everything's a total mess." Vale poured her homemade herbal tea to settle Chiara's nerves, and when Chiara finally cooled down, Vale swallowed her pride and apologized for snapping like such an ungrateful jerk. This place is basically her second home, so Vale told her, "Go on, let it all spill whenever it feels like you're about to burst." Now, can she finally spill what happened? Turns out their academy has a special farm built for potion research, packed with over 100 kinds of medicinal herbs, each one grown in magic environments tuned to its needs, all watched over by strict supervision. But this morning, the duty guard went to check the herbs and found every single one dead. No one knows what wrecked them yet, though the magic management system was running perfectly, and this is the Royal Academy, so guards are on lock. Breaking in is almost impossible. Because that loud chaos started this morning, the academy hasn't stopped spiraling. Reports, rules, everything. And it looks like her mom, Seraphine, got called in too, so she couldn't even finish and turn in the report. They still haven't nailed the culprits behind the Eva and Nathan village mess, and she's sick to her bones of all this chaos. Vale agrees. But now, does that trail smell like it's all about plants getting targeted? Or could it be that missing witch? But hey, if this is yet another farm mess, then the power of his dragon tree sword could finally come in handy. Kiara jolted to her feet, stunned. Wait, is he actually coming to the academy? Seriously, Seraphine told her to bring him along too, and it worked out perfectly. But before she could even finish, Vale snapped in and warned her she was getting way too close. She shrieked at what she'd just done, so loud that even the woodman outside stopped and wondered if some cat had gone berserk. The very next day, Chiara thanked everyone who'd come to help, and Martina waved it off like it was nothing. We've got to help each other when trouble hits. Meanwhile, Hanan and Simon were still clutching hands, practically vibrating with excitement for their very first time here, though today was a day off, so it was way quieter than usual. Kiara led them straight to the herbal farm she'd been hyping for days. Everything inside felt absolutely brutal. Seraphine spotted them and sprinted right over, and Vale's arrival made her light up with relief. She was just chatting with the manager, and he swore the last patrol was spotless before they headed home. Yet somehow, overnight, everything turned into a wasteland. The damage is too massive to ignore, so they figure magic did it, but she can't feel a single leftover trace. Vale drove the dragon tree sword into the soil and stared at it like he was hunting answers. The soil itself, nothing about it screams special, but that moisture soaking everything feels weird, like something foreign is mixed in. So if it's the water, then the watermill is behind it, and they'd better investigate that too. Honestly, that's exactly what it looks like. This wasn't natural at all, someone did it, and whoever did it is insanely skilled. Vale said they should split up to investigate, and Seraphine snapped, "Perfect." Then she vowed to rally the crew and go hunt down the watermelon. Hanan's not done yet. She's determined to dig into the whole farm and uncover every last secret. So she begged permission to let her scour the earth, while Simon dove deep into the water, and Seraphine said yes. No hesitation, just instant agreement. Once they're done digging up every detail, they can finally regroup. Vale strolls around with Martina and Chiara, hunting for anyone who was around last night to ask what they saw. But the streets are empty, like nobody even stepped outside. It's a school day off and the whole incident is still hanging in the air. So honestly, running into Dirk feels like a long shot. Chiara said straight up that only the weirdos would be out roaming on a day like this. At that exact moment, a curly-haired girl gasped in shock the second she spotted Chiara. She had no idea she'd run into him right here. Chiara groaned through gritted teeth. What a complete nightmare. The curly-haired girl asked if she'd been summoned too, and Chiara snapped back that she was here by choice, voluntarily. The curly-haired girl nodded along. Unlike Chiara, they practically begged her to step in because this crisis was hitting the whole academy, and Chiara turned to Vale and Martina like, "Remember what I told you, today's only for the weirdos." The curly-haired girl finally clocked them, then demanded their names, because they didn't look like students or staff at all. They blurted out their names and stepped in like, "Hey, we're Chiara's friends." The curly-haired girl crumpled to her knees in pure shock. Chiara actually has friends, and she's got 2 of them. Still friendless, she comes off a little intense, but you can tell she's not a bad soul. Chiara taps her shoulder. She shot her a reassuring smile like, "It's okay," because one day she left close friends too, and the curly-haired girl was absolutely furious at the pity in her eyes. Chiara just burst out laughing. Was she trying to get under someone's skin? Then she quickly shot back with an apology, and Hainan, arriving with Simone, grinned, saying they looked totally in sync. Vale wanted to know how the investigation was going, but there wasn't a single clue left. Whoever did this covered their tracks like a pro, like they'd done it 100 times. Then the curly-haired girl snapped that they couldn't just keep talking and leave her out of it. And now, their trail was multiplying. Wait, could those 2 be Chiara's friends too? Yep, it's Hanan and Simone. Chiara was having the time of her life teasing everyone, so much that even Vale finally felt bad and cut her off. Then Heenan stepped in, asked straight up if Chiara had any friends at the academy, and Chiara had nothing to say because of course she didn't. Now she's just as depressed as that curly-haired girl. Simone couldn't shake the curiosity. Who were those 2? Then the curly-haired girl stepped up and introduced herself. That's Charlotte Brower, and right next to her is Claudia, her personal maid. Vale snapped at the name Brower, because that family wasn't just famous, they were one of the kingdom's top noble houses. Martina whispered to Vale, all worried and tense, asking if the Browers had any ties to his family. Turns out they don't. He's only ever heard the name and they've never met. But wait a second. Hold up, why does Charlotte feel so familiar to him, even as he sinks into a deep spiral of thoughts? Claudia's eyes pinned him in place, and that stare had been burning non-stop for a while, so he finally blurted out, "Did I mess up? Did I do something wrong?" Claudia shot back that he was wrong, because not today. What does that even mean? Did he mess up with her back then? But no way, he and Charlotte were kids, way too young to know any of it. He probably blurted it out without a second thought about what it would cost, and she couldn't stop herself from wondering if his memories had already started slipping. But then she was in total shock. She never saw his complete lack of recognition coming, and she couldn't believe he'd really hang around with that many girls. As the Orland family's heir, he's got that reckless confidence. So yeah, it's no shock he flirts like he owns the room. Vale was completely stunned, and he immediately shot back, insisting it wasn't like that at all. So what kind of image did she even have of him? Before things could spiral, Charlotte cut in mid-conversation and demanded to know what they were whispering about. The moment they asked if they were trying to become friends, both of them snapped. "No way," instantly. Charlotte insisted they were here to investigate, not to play nice, and told Chiara and the others to jump in too. Chiara snapped, asking why they were the ones getting bossed around, but Charlotte brushed it off and called Claudia. Charlotte of the Brower family, just saying it makes Vale's mind twitch, like a warning he can't ignore, and he vows he'll track it down later. They tore through the whole day, hunting and hunting, but they're still coming up empty. No clue, not a single one, so yeah, they're calling it for tonight and pushing this to tomorrow, Charlotte's side of things. But wait, could the Mist Witch really be behind all of this? What is she hunting for exactly? Because this is getting seriously ugly. Vale couldn't shake the feeling that the mist might be aimless, like it had no plan, no target, no end. So far, her moves don't follow any rules. She just does whatever feels fun in the moment, and that's the only thing steering her. Claudia nodded, then the knights in the magic corps snapped that they suspected the same truth. Simone's hands shook, and the horror of it hit like a punch. How are you even supposed to fight someone when they won't listen to reason at all? They'll rush over to soothe her, blurting that they don't even know it's really the Mist Witch, so she shouldn't lose sleep over it yet. If Chiara sees her coming, she vows right then. She'll throw herself in front of them and keep everyone safe. Charlotte couldn't believe the words spilling out of Chiara's mouth, like friendship just hit with pure power. Suddenly, the mist that billowed up behind Chiara cracked with her laughter. She's practically glowing because everyone's chatting with her like they can't wait another second. She cupped Chiara's face, smiling. What a perfect harvest, everything looked so delicious, until she froze them with a nasty spell. But Charlotte shot free, ripped her magic into motion, and screamed for the mist to let Chiara go. She slammed a brutal spell into the mist, trying to shatter it, but Charlotte just kept shredding her own robe. Look at her, not a single scratch on her skin. That mist seemed desperate to drag her away, but it didn't look like it would get its wish today, because Seraphine and the others arrived right on time. A spark of excitement hit her, and honestly, that was a seriously great harvest. They'll lunge toward Chiara, but the moment she tried to look back, the Mist Witch vanished too. No way Chiara got snatched. That night, everyone crowded into a strategy meeting, because they could feel it coming. The mist would drift into the academy too, and when it did, it would go straight for Chiara Seraphine's daughter. Seraphine told them an explosion spell had been set off at the water mill, and just like Vale spotted, someone had tampered with the water supply too. They were stuck handling all of that, so they rolled in late. The fog that rolled in and clung to the scene, it was just her cloak, left behind like a haunting after she vanished. Seraphine leaned in to inspect it. The second she grabbed that card, she realized it was completely blank. A wild gust of wind ripped through them, snatching the moment mid-breath as it whooshed past. A mist curled over it, until I realized it wasn't real at all, just a projection. She cornered Vale with a deadly ultimatum. Hand over the dragon tree sword and show up at the spot she named if he wants Chiara back. She'll write the location on the card, and she'll be right there waiting. The card's marked location fields buried deep in the woods behind the academy, where the staff normally log every single facility tied to the school. But there was nothing there. That's what Seraphine remembers, too, so this has to be a quick hideout. Still, she can't believe the person she was hiding from was this close. No time to waste. Gear up and head out now because they don't have a single other option. They're all rushing in to save Chiara. Lloyd shot his hand up to speak. We're already running late, so we need to rest up and gear before we head out, and we should also call the knights in the mage corps for backup. Vale got it. He wants to rush back to the base ASAP so he can get a few things ready. and we'll meet at the forest entrance tomorrow morning." Right as they were about to head out, Charlotte burst after them, demanding she was coming too. She's about to land a brutal hit on that smug mist witch and make her pay for every single prank she's ever thrown. And if they're going to rescue her, they'll grab Chiara too. Claudia leaned in and told Vale the truth. Yeah, Charlotte might sound tough, but deep down she's terrified for Chiara just like everyone else. Vale totally gets it. Those two are straight-up legendary rivals. They shove hate in each other's faces, but I bet they've always respected each other's skills. They just can't stand being real about it. You agreed to go together, but then he said he had one more thing to prep and asked if you all could roll back to your base for a bit. Charlotte practically burst with excitement and said yes right away. With her by their side, they're not just strong. They've got the power of 100, no, 1,000 warriors. Since the fight was tomorrow, Martina fired up dinner tonight to fuel everyone to the max, right there while they were all chatting off to the side. Claudia snapped her head to Vale. If Charlotte was going, then she had no choice but to jump in too. Sure, she didn't look like a fighter, but her martial arts skills were legit, and she'd be their muscle. The very next day, they charged straight into the forest. The farther they push in, the denser that mist gets, so they better stay together because one wrong step and someone could get split off. At last, they tracked down Seraphine, Lloyd, and the rest. Now there's nothing stopping them from charging straight for the witch's manor. They can't believe how many people showed up, because that mist is what they're really fighting, and this time everyone's fired up to finally take her down. They pushed onward, then disaster hit. A few knights were sent to scout ahead, but the deeper they ventured, the denser the mist got and the darker the evil energy swelled all around her. And just stepping near it made every one of them reel and feel sick. They marched straight to the manor gates, but that evil aura hit like a wall. Getting inside was going to be brutally hard. Seraphine pressed her forehead, horrified, so the evil energy didn't stop there. It was reaching them right where they stood. Martina and Simone shot back that they're totally fine. Then Charlotte's eyes narrowed, because she could feel the dark magic aura hanging in the air, but it wasn't touching her body at all. If they're bringing up something they all share in common, then it has to be the crops they ate from that underground lake. Because if those veggies really grew in there, yeah, they could have totally had that kind of effect. After they pushed forward for a while, they finally stumbled onto the mansion the mist had pointed them to, and the air felt cursed, like some dark magic had just been waiting for them to arrive. At the front gate, a clever detection spell is carved and set to scream the moment anyone intrudes. Honestly, it's brilliant. The plan could shove them to the edge, but Sarah wouldn't let it end there. Seraphine and the others will deliberately trip the detection spell to pull everyone's eyes in. And while they play decoy, Vale's crew will slip into the mansion, grab Chiara, and slam a barrier spell over the whole place the moment they're inside. Lloyd made it clear. Saving Chiara comes first, but if they spot the mist, they'll lure her out and lock her down. If they think it's too dangerous, they need to yank back immediately. Then the operation kicks off right now. They marched right up to the gate on purpose, set off the detection spell, and watched it swing open. The door slammed open, and the guys who hit Nathan's village poured out, and that's when it clicked. All those recent attacks were linked. And just like that, the battle erupted. Vale and the others slipped into the mansion under the cover of night, staying hidden from every watchful eye. As they tore into each other outside, going all out. The second they stepped inside, something felt seriously off, like the room was screaming danger. It's weirdly silent. Yeah, they expected guards inside, but not a single soul anywhere in sight. Martina realized the inside was way bigger than it ever looked from the outside, and Charlotte swore it was powered by spatial magic. Simone swung the door open and rushed in to inspect the rooms. Charlotte hurriedly shoved the warning into her face. Don't do it, because it's a trap. Because she warned her, Simone slipped out at the last second, just as the trap tried to close in. Claudia stamped her foot, rapped the floor and walls, and leaned in to hear what was on the other side. Because this place reeks of traps, and every room feels like it's packed with at least 3. Charlotte's face tightened with worry. This setup must be drowning in a ridiculous amount of magical energy just to conjure all of it. Just then, the mist that hissed into Charlotte's ear, telling her she was being, and she swept them into her gorgeous mansion, like it was built just for them. With a single flick of her fingers, the floor vanished under their feet, and then the whole sky started dropping them, one by one. Hainan slammed her power into the ground, conjuring a flower cushion that cushioned their fall like a soft landing. They touched down inside a room wrapped in swirling curtains, like the world had blindfolded itself for what came next. The mist that surged up behind one claim, trailing like a warning, saying she didn't truly need anyone except Vale, then pointing out how he showed up with this huge crew in tow. She'll have to charm every single one of them. And right then Charlotte stood there, smiling kindly, thanking her for that warm welcome. Before she swung her staff and went in for the attack. She's praying this tiny gift will be just what he needs. The mist was laughing. Then out of nowhere, a whole bunch of her burst into view. Their illusions crashing in at once, all flooding in together. Right then, Mist swallowed Veil whole. Because she didn't come for anyone else, she came for him. And the rest of them just flail pathetically inside her illusions. While Veil's body won't move at all, so this is what magic looks like in the mist. Suddenly, he was yanked into a room. And the mist that had been looming in front of him finally stopped circling, leaving just the two of them. Then she yanked the curtain aside, and there was Chiara sprawled in bed, dead to the world. Guess that makes the three of us now. She clicked her tongue as Veil yelled for Chiara, then told him she was only sleeping, so he didn't need to shout like that. The moment the dragon tree sword hit her hands, she realized another wielder had shown up, and that sword immediately killed the vibe. She was *loving turning that village to dust, and now he'd come in and ruin it, leaving her absolutely furious. Veil clenched his teeth, while she smiled like she loved every second of that massacre. What a damn monster. But he's convinced there's more to it than that. That dragon tree sword lashes out with its venomous vines, sucking the opponent's magic dry with every hit. That has to be the only real threat for someone like her with magic that monstrous, and yeah, that's why she's terrified, isn't it? So, he really does know. All right, if that's the situation, this'll be over fast. A choking mist slammed into Chiara and demanded the sword, or she'd be dead. And with him barely standing in his current state, there was no way he could take her on, so he had to comply. The Veil flashed the dragon tree sword through the mist, snatching it right out of her reach. There it is, now she has to hand Chiara back, just like she promised. So if she'd actually say something like that, I might as well test the blade and see how cleanly it slices. But before she could get her hands on it, the blade shattered into a storm of steel, and then she spotted it, strange words carved into the hilt. A self-damage curse, her pulse jumped. Of course, Veil's power was crawling back. He lunged forward and snatched Chiara in an instant. A haze seemed to glare at him as a wicked flash of steel appeared. Wait, was that a fake sword? The nerve of it, and right then, the whole room started to shake and Simone tore into the scene in her dragon form, and she came crashing through with everyone on her back. Hainan and Charlotte slammed a high five. Then the spell chugged off without a hitch, and their whole plan snapped into place. All that prep from last night finally paid off, and yeah, they even rigged a tracking spell onto the sword in case it ever broke. Martina thrust the real dragon tree sword into Veil's hands. Now they're about to go down. She clenches that fake sword like it's alive, the mist wrapping it tight as pure rage surges through her, because they're really pushing her buttons. While Hanan and Claudia tended to Chiara, Veil blew his top and screamed at everyone to grab the mist, before it slips away. Simone roared, and Martina snapped that she'd never forgive the mist for every dark thing she'd done up to now. The mist just let out a breathy sigh, like it knew something was coming. As she snapped her fingers, wind slammed into the air, whipping up a thick mist that surged straight toward them. Hainan slammed her powers into action and screamed at everyone, "Don't breathe that fog." Veil shot his hands up and covered his mouth in time. But Martina and Charlotte refused to keep going. Then both of them crumpled to the ground. A seed burst out of the dragon tree sword's hilt, and before he could even finish his thrust into the ground, he was already sprinting straight to Martina and Charlotte's side. That mist snickered at everyone, and anyone who stepped in its way was hit with the sweetest dreams imaginable. They're stuck inside a dream so perfect and sweet, it feels impossible to wake up from. In Martina's dreams, she slipped back into being little, sparking pans on the stove with her father right there, and his praise washed over her like warm sunshine. She vowed she'd grind harder starting today and become a legendary chef just like her dad, and he ruffled her hair, smiling because he knew she'd make it happen, like a childhood dream finally coming to life. Meanwhile, Charlotte's stuck at a stuffy ball, bored out of her mind because it's only adults there, and she's desperate to go home, but her father invited her, so she has to bite her tongue and act right. Right then, a boy stepped up and invited her to team up and play together. She spun around and refused. Then the moment she tried to pull back, the boy shot out and grabbed her hand, right before they both got the scolding they were scared of, and yanked her toward the playground. She's always been stuck around adults, so this is the first time she's actually playing with kids her own age. This is pure fun. She wants this moment to stretch forever, just so she can stay wrapped up in Veil. Outside, Veil snapped his guard up and fought back the misty assault, all while he kept his mouth covered. That mist mocked him, and she made protecting someone in the middle of a fight sound painfully boring, so Veil couldn't fire back. In this smoke screen, every exchange turns against him, and he's already at his limit, but he still has to shield those two. Suddenly, the fog started to vanish. Then Chiara ripped it away, and the mist got sucked up like it never stood a chance. She demanded to know how long those two planned to stay asleep, because they needed to wake up already. And just like that, Martina and Charlotte hauled themselves up, rubbing the sleep out of their eyes. They finally snapped awake. Claudia called Chiara over and pressed a tiny bottle into her hands, saying, clutching her staff, she fought through the biting mist that made her grit her teeth. He snapped his grip into place and forged a raging fireball in one hand. But Martina snapped her sword up and blocked the attack cold. Just leave it to her. Now she's an adventurer and she'll take care of it. At the very back, Charlotte's cheeks flared as she stared at Vale. As she drifted out of the moment, Chiara grabbed her attention, reminding her to stay sharp and keep those memories locked in. And just like that, Charlotte clutched her staff like it was her last lifeline. She knew that if she didn't warn them, her magnificent magic would blast the mist back, and that smirk would vanish fast. But the truth is, she was pissed, because she couldn't believe two little weaklings dared to charge her at the same time. The two of them unleashed one brutal, combined magic that the mist swirled and hit, right in front of her arm like it had nowhere else to go. Simone could barely wrap her head around it. She actually dodged that attack, like she could see the shift in magical power before it hit. And that meant magic attacks were suddenly fighting with one hand tied. But then Vale's voice cut through the air, and when she said they did great, it lit a fire in all of them. The mist got shoved against the wall and vines wrapped tight around her arm, because those aren't just plants, they drain magical power. Vines clawed across the floor and walls as everyone battled, and that mist just kept snickering like it knew a secret. Are they really trying to grind her down with a war of attrition? Teleportation magic can't fire because dreams throttle it, and those tiny roots keep unraveling and wrapping her up. So yeah, it looks like they're winning, as long as they believe she's trapped in this room. She slammed into the wall, then sprinted straight for it like it was her only way out. Vale shouted at Simone, and she answered with a thunderous roar that shook the air. A wall of mist slammed her to a stop. Then everywhere, vines crawled up to the ceiling, swallowing the hallways too. She's got nowhere left to run. Thick mist swirls in as Hanan and Claudia keep pouring water non-stop into the roots, soaking everything they can. She heard ginkgo trees shoot up at lightning speed, and that's why the whole boost got cranked up. But she slammed a fire onto Simone's tail. Then Simone snapped back into her human form. Hainan doused the flames with water, alerted Vale, and Vale rushed to respond by calling for them and charged straight into the mist, now tangled and held tight by the vine. He stared in shock. Every ounce of the vine's power had gone still. Did it just gulp down all the magic? He strode into the mist with his sword bared, then barked at her to stop fighting and accept her fate. That sudden mist that laughed out of nowhere, like it was daring her to be reckless. She tore free from the vines. He yanked the veil and snagged the moment right there. She caught him right then. When victory feels guaranteed, despair slams in out of nowhere. And that's why this moment is so damn fun, isn't it? Vale clicked his tongue because he could feel it. She still had a ton of power left. She slammed him hard into the wall. Everything inside him snapped, and he crumpled to the floor. Then she snatched his collar and yanked him toward the exit, because if her own hands can't crack it, she'll make someone else do the job. And she can even score a sword too. What luck, right? Honestly, that works for me. They're about to step outside, so she can sink her hands into him and give him a brutal torture. But a massive barrier sealed off the mansion, blocking everything in its path. She slammed her palm into the barrier, trying to shatter it. But it was her fingers that finally shattered, like they were the price she paid. Vale finally broke the silence, admitting he'd misread her, and it hit her that she'd been so locked in on what was right in front of her that she never even saw it coming. Her magic was getting siphoned into the dragon tree sword, way faster than she could ever imagine. Lloyd snapped orders for everyone to chase that mist down, binding it and flinging it with transfer magic. Still, the mist chuckled on in silence, and she never once thought she'd walk straight into that kind of mistake. Everything kept hitting me out of nowhere, and I couldn't look away. It was straight up wild and super interesting. Next time they've got to run it back, no excuses. And just like that, she vanished into thin air. Vale gave them a nod from above, signaling the win, and the crowd below erupted into happy cheers. He spun around and faced the crowd charging toward him. Simone blurted out whether he was okay, or if he'd busted a bone, panicking, while Claudia shoved him to crouch so she could start treating him right away. Vale dropped into a crouch, his worry spiking after they nearly burst through, but the wall's vines wrapped around him like a cushion and saved the day. He just can't stop apologizing for putting them through that. He was over the moon that Chiara made it back, and he thanked everyone for working with him, Claudia and Charlotte included. He caught Charlotte drifting off with zero attention on him and asked, straight up, whether she was sick somewhere. She squealed, spun toward him with cheeks burning red, and begged him, please don't look at her. Vale tilted his head, totally baffled. Did he just mess up again and offend her? Claudia let out a heavy sigh. As she thought it, Charlotte remembered, didn't she? Her reaction screams the whole truth. Charlotte marched up to Vale, because it had been ages since they'd last seen each other, and Vale looked totally thrown off. She figured it had been ages since the Orland ball, and if they were engaged like everyone said, then yeah, she was pretty sure of it, right? Hearing Martina and Chiara shout in pure shock. Wait, she just dropped the bombshell. Vale and Charlotte are engaged. Kyra shot back, asking what she meant, and if they somehow knew each other. Charlotte told him they'd met at a ball at Vale's mansion when they were just 5, instantly clicking into best friends territory. And once their fathers hit it off too, they didn't waste time. They got engaged right there on the spot. They'll finally remember her now, after all this time. It had been ages since he saw his children, and he never once imagined he'd cross paths with them again, like this. He's genuinely relieved. She's okay now, and Charlotte wipes away the tears spilling down her face. Tears streaked down her face as she thrust out her hand, begging to help her Vale up. Then boom, he crumpled to the floor, collapsing at last. They hauled everyone back to the underground lake so Vale could recover, and for once, things were going smoothly. Seraphine showed up with Lloyd and the rest to visit, and she couldn't stop staring. She had no idea a dungeon could hide a lake so massive and magnificent underground. Martina thanked them for going all that way, and Lloyd waved it off like it was nothing at all. And honestly, since they played a huge part in catching the Mist Witch, it makes total sense that they'd come over just to thank them. And yeah, once again, he wants to say thanks for what happened the other day. Seraphine demanded where Vale was, and Martina snapped that he'd already fought his way back to consciousness. But the doctor said he'd dumped too much magic all at once, and that hit his body like a wrecking ball. Still, if he rests for 2 or 3 days, he should bounce back. Seraphine then shoved a pouch into their hands, a potion she brewed just to speed up recovery, and they were told to give it to him after dinner. Then Chiara thanked her. He rolled up with a cart stacked high with medicinal herbs and their seeds, fresh from their field, and pushed it toward her, begging her to take it all to the academy because there was enough to make every single person on the farm explode with joy. And about the thank you gift they made, yes, it matches what they asked for, but are they sure it's what they truly want? Lloyd talked it over with Gregory to make sure nothing was off, yet the question still hung in the air. Are they satisfied? Martina shot back, yes, absolutely. She spotted the woodman waving at them, then realized everything was ready, so she swung the coop door open and told them to shove it inside. Martina's been begging to raise chickens for ages, and Simon just swore he'd do his absolute best to be the caretaker. These silver chickens are elite egg machines. People fight for them because their eggs are packed with insane nutrition, and since they're so rare, you hardly ever see them for sale. And it's crazy because there are just so many of them. Martina and the others pushed for a little longer, leaving Charlotte totally stunned. Because their stamina is unreal, and honestly, farm work never gives you a break. Chiara demanded they team up and split into 2 groups, one for the field, one for chicken duty. Then Martina slid up to Charlotte and asked her to harvest together because she had something she desperately wanted to ask. Hainan, Claudia, and Simon got stuck on chicken duty, and when they saw what was waiting for them, Hainan's eyes just filled up, like he was about to break down. Simon spun toward them with a grin, and the chickens were going full blast, so Hainan shot back. They're more than just lively. Claudia leaned in and listened. Everyone warned her these chickens are nasty and hard to raise, but were they truly this ferocious? They sounded like they were practically buzzing with rage. If they keep going like this, one fight could turn lethal and someone might not walk away, but they can't babysit them forever, right? How are they supposed to raise them? The chickens were moments away from tearing into each other again. When Simone snapped at them and they reach out and demand they all become friends, then everyone finally cools off and Simone's rampage fizzles out. Even her order for them to step into her room, and just like that they fall in line. What is going on? Did they feel Simone's wild, animal instinct threatening to snap if they resist? She's a dragon, after all. Then it's settled. Hainan will name her as the leader of those chicks. Yeah, meanwhile, Martina, Chiara, and Charlotte were stuck on field duty, and Martina was showing Charlotte how to pick fruit that's already perfectly ripe. Charlotte's panic spiked. She swore it would blow up the second she touched it. But Martina just grinned, shoved one into her hands, and told her to go on, try it. Then she ordered her to toss everything into the boxes, because once that last bit went in, the harvest was finally done and they kept picking. Charlotte leaned in and asked if the thing Martina wanted to talk about was the engagement, and Martina froze so hard that she squeezed the tomato too tight. Then it exploded everywhere. Charlotte admitted there's way more to the engagement story than she'd let them in on. They only crossed paths once at that ball, and after that night, the engagement got shattered and shut down for good. Her dad didn't give her a single reason. Why? Because she swore Vale hated her, panicked that she'd never see him again, and turned it into a whole disaster. Back then, she dragged Claudia through so much trouble. But she let out a breath of relief when he didn't brush her off the moment they met again, and he was still dressed in the same kind veil she remembered. Looking back, his father had pushed the engagement hard, so maybe it fell apart because the two families just never truly clicked. So that's the whole truth behind it. Martina couldn't stop wondering if any feelings for Vale were still alive in her, but the question tangled in her throat, and she kept stuttering like her words ran away. Charlotte burst out laughing, finally getting it. He was still that same kind of Vale she remembered, and that was enough to set Martina at ease. But now she was worried, like, wait, does that mean she likes him? Martina went pink, totally stunned by what she heard. Right then, Chiara marched over and said she was done watering. Charlotte ruined the moment. Just as they were finally about to get hyped, she complained and killed the vibe. They were hyping up how insanely cool Vale was, like it was the talk of the whole. Chiara wondered if she was just bragging since they're engaged, but Charlotte snapped back that it wasn't like that at all, because that engagement was already yesterday's news. Now she's only there to ride his side and cheer him on. All right, Chiara suddenly remembered Seraphine handed her Vale's medicine, so she snatched the plan and told Martina to slip it into Vale's lunch, and Martina opened her mouth to refuse until Chiara. But Chiara leaned in and promised, "Don't worry, I'll handle it," so she better go. Charlotte swung her gaze to Chiara, clocked exactly what she was doing, and told her straight, "Be honest, or you're going to get caught." Seriously, Chiara wanted nothing to do with hearing that from him. Martina stepped in to watch over Vale as he slept peacefully, then set his meal right on the table. She spotted the bandage on his face curling off, then gently touched his cheek to set it back in place. He looks absolutely battered, and she can't help but wish he wouldn't keep pushing it so far. Right when Martina was doing it, Vale's eyes snapped open in a stunned flutter. She gasped in pure shock, jerked back, toppled off the bed, and smacked her head on the table. Vale shot up, shouting, "Are you okay?" Martina tried to answer, saying she was. Vale leaned in and she told him, "Lunch is ready." Then she pointed out a magic potion from Seraphine sitting in the tray. "Drink it after you eat." Vale thanked her, and she eased back to leave, but Vale grabbed her mid-step and stopped her from walking out, and he invited her to share a meal together for the first time in ages, firing off the question of whether anything happened while he was asleep. Martina lit up and agreed, then hurried to grab her food too. Over the meal, she told him the chickens had finally arrived, and Vale's face practically shone. He'd been waiting for that, and even better, she'd been pitching in hard with the farm work. Even though everyone was wiped out after the missed battle, and honestly, he was grateful she'd fought for his sake too. Martina snapped back that it wasn't enough. Compared to his grind, what she was doing meant nothing, and Vale shot back. "That's not true. She's an adventurer, and she's facing the front right now, isn't she?" What? She thanked him for those words. Then suddenly the dream she'd had back then hit her like a memory flooding back. She set her bowl down and leaned in, whispering that there was still something she hadn't told him. Yet. Her dad didn't just cook. He fed the household magic asterisk, and once she saw him in action, cooking crawled straight into her dreams, and he started training her early. But her dream of becoming an adventurer started burning hotter and hotter. So she spilled it to her father, and he shut her down, screaming that it was too dangerous. And still she defied him and ran for home anyway. She doesn't regret running from home for a second, because meeting him and everyone else changed her life, and she grew into a real adventurer. But even so, regret gnaws at her. Her father still won't even acknowledge her, and she's desperate to one day tell him about everything she's fought for as an adventurer. Vale just tells her, "Don't worry, it'll be fine." If she can't find the courage to face her father alone, he'll step in and go with her, because nothing sells her growth and wins like him as the witness. And the moment she imagines him greeting her dad, Martina's cheeks instantly blaze with a blush. When another saw her reaction, Vale started panicking. Maybe she hated it. But nope, she actually wants him to show up. He just can't seem to get it. The next day, Claudia burst in with the news that Charlotte's room was finally ready, and Chiara immediately pushed, asking if Charlotte was about to move in too. Charlotte grinned and said yes. because who wouldn't want to soak up a place this amazing? Hanan had been sure Claudia wasn't even here last night, until he realized she was busy lugging their bags. Just then, Vale burst into the room and lit it up with a loud greeting for everyone. Simone leaned in and asked, "Are you okay now?" And Vale nodded, saying he was. Seraphine's medicine hit like a miracle. When he glanced around, he froze. This place looked like a full-on luxury suite had been built overnight. Sure, they still hadn't checked with the homeowner yet, but Charlotte leaned in and asked, "Is it okay if I introduce myself here?" Chiara let out a heavy sigh like, "She's only asking now. The room's already decked out like it was ready for them the whole time." Vale burst into laughter and welcomed her with open arms, already thrilled to have her study here with them. Charlotte smiled with relief and vowed to pitch in too. She'd help with the farming. Chiara finally caved, and honestly, I guess they just had to roll with it. She said it like it was no big deal, but Hainan could tell she was secretly thrilled to have Charlotte there. Claudia was watching all of them, and then she smirked because she knew things were about to get seriously interesting. And yeah, Claudia is literally me right now as I read this. All right, it's been ages since Vale last had to hit the fields for farm work. He's sick of waiting. He wants a hit restart fast. He pulled the dragon tree sword free, ready to use its power to plant seeds and kickstart a new beginning. When Chiara finally stopped him, as she stared at the dragon tree sword, she spotted a crack. They rolled up to the Rimal Trading Company, demanded Gregory, and thank heaven, he happened to be right here today. Gregory lit up when he greeted them, and the second he saw Vale, man, it had been forever. He couldn't stop smiling. Then he told everyone he'd heard Vale was the MVP in the mist subjugation, and honestly, the dude's just unreal. He paused the moment he saw Vale's weak, worn-out expression, then snapped, "What's going on?" Turns out Vale had run straight into a real problem. A hairline crack split across his sword, right when he was out in the fields doing his work. He shoved magic into it to keep it functional, but the crack didn't stop. It spidered wider and worse, like it had been hammered too hard back during that missed battle the other day. He hates admitting it, but he's pretty sure the veggies won't be coming for a while. He's really sorry. So Gregory will reach out to their buyers himself, and that relief hits hard, so Vale thanks him right away. Sure, a regular weapon could get patched up by any blacksmith, but one forged from rare materials. That's a whole other nightmare, because even the blacksmith who'd stepped in before refused him too. If he can't work with his own hands, he won't be able to keep growing those special vegetables. So there's no way he can keep the same pace, and the dungeon farm might have to shut down. Gregory clamped a hand on Vale's shoulder and snapped, "Don't jump to conclusions, hold up." Then he said he'd start asking around because maybe someone out there knows the right blacksmith. Jennifer stepped into the glow, and the timing felt perfect. Everyone's been dragged through non-stop expeditions and fights, so a breather is exactly what they needed. And once they're recharged, they'll slam their heads together and decide the next move. Speaking of relaxing, how about a hot spring getaway? There's a place called Hiddle Hot Springs, and trust me, it's absolutely marvelous. People swear this thing heals wounds and injuries so cleanly that it even leaves their skin silky smooth. Like magic after healing H. Chiara wondered if those sword cracks could magically mend themselves in the spring waters. Vale nodded along like, "Yeah, sure." And then Chiara realized she wasn't actually joking about the hot springs. Back at the underground lake, Hainan, Charlotte, Claudia, and Simone were stuck guarding the farm, and they could feel it in their bones. That sword was worth everything because speed changed the whole game, and now they just had to figure out how to fix it. Right on cue, Vale came back with a grin and told them they were heading to the hot springs. Charlotte's whole body screamed with pain, and she thought, this would hit perfectly right now asterisk. But then the real fear hit. Could they even make it there? Chiara's body was a tangled mess, one painful knot after another. Vale caught wind of a hot spring that can mend weapons, and now he's itching to hit the Hiddle Hot Springs. Because he can't wrap his head around the fact that a tip he once heard from a game in his past life is paying off right now. Simone's like, "Okay, we have to check this out." She can't wait to soak in that giant bath, and Hainan's reminding her, "Don't get so hyped you accidentally turn into a dragon." All right, everyone, time to pack up. If it's the Hiddle Hot Springs, then it hits perfectly. One of Charlotte's family villas sits right over there, so everyone just moves in as her guests. So she had Claudia whip the villa into shape, calmed her with a Vale-side setup and a deep breath. Because they're still freaking out about where they'll sleep, and nobody even knows how long they'll have to stay. That hot spring resort is so huge they'll never finish it in a single day. And to make it worse, nobody has a clue where the weapon-repairing spring even shows up. Because unlike the regular ones, it doesn't pop up every day. It's just like those dungeon rooms that only show up when the stars align. Like the game has a secret trigger, and this might be one of them. So they could be stuck there for a while, until Claudia slips back into action, finishes her letter, and fires it off with a messenger bird to the villa. While they're gone, she'll stay put and keep a sharp watch on the farm with the woodmen. So Vale thanked her and Claudia waved it off like, "Don't thank me." Still, she knew even if he can't keep farming, he'll be fine. Then he could just marry into the Brower family, only for Charlotte to snap back immediately, furious. Vale looked crushed, so Claudia tried to lift the mood with a joke, only for everyone to blanket hard, and Charlotte snapped that her humor still needed work. Okay, Queen I, though. I thought it was hilarious. After a wild ride in a carriage, they finally burst into the Hidel hot springs, right on the brink of relief. Simone wrinkled her nose at the strange smell, and Martina laughed it off. Turns out it was just the spring's signature scent. From here, they're going the rest of the way on foot, because Charlotte's family staff are already taking the carriage straight to the villa. They sprinted down the streets, stunned by the endless sea of shops lining every corner. And honestly, this place has even more food stalls than Drazen. Like, it's pure tourist town chaos. All right, time to go recon and hunt down some hot spring info. Vale even told them they didn't have to come, that they'd just mess up their sightseeing, right? But nope, they pushed back hard. They're here to help find it, so he figured he might as well let them. But it wasn't going great. Too many temptations everywhere, they kept snagging stuff here and there, and this wasn't even the plan. The tourist vibes are crazy strong, everyone's smiling and welcoming, and now this is way harder than they ever expected. Charlotte thought she was about to buy the bracelet for some secret intel, but it turned out to be nothing more than a tip for the restaurant next door. Yeah, she got played hard. Late no way she got scammed, and then she clenched the bracelet so hard it snapped in her grip. While that disaster hit, Vale met up with some folks and thanked them for their time. Still, they've got zero luck. Everybody's heard the rumors, but nobody's found the location. Yet it's still comforting that so many people are hunting it, like it could be real. But who knows if it's even real at all? Maybe they should hit the back alleys next. There's a real chance they'll stumble onto totally new leads down there. They sprinted over, only to find the whole street totally empty. No one breathing, not a soul in sight. Back then, this whole place was buzzing nonstop, but now most of those shops are shuttered, and Martina pushed the idea of heading back to the main road. Hainan spotted a shop that still looked like it was somehow staying open. They burst in. It looked like a whole game shop, right there in front of them. Super retro, the moment the old couple laid eyes on them, joy lit up their faces. It had been ages since anyone came through the door, so when customers finally showed up, Charlotte gasped, "What a blessing!" She had them pegged as mannequins, and Martina hurried to bow and apologize for crashing in. She really wanted to ask about the hot spring, but with music blasting inside, she figured they probably wouldn't hear her. They all jolted in surprise when they heard Vale blurt out, stunned at. After FFS showed off their minigame, if you ranked high every season you could snag limited rare items. So he went all in, grinding at Harding game. He couldn't believe it, out of all places it was right here. Without wasting a second, he shot to the counter and demanded he be allowed to play that game. He yanked his gloves off and pulled them back, right before he charged into whatever came next. Can help the hammer slam into the miles in the games. He moved so fast there wasn't a single wasted step. Like the whole layout was burned into his brain. Tell me, does he memorize the entire place? They had no clue he was this good. Wait, is he actually crying? Because what I'm watching right now feels like a full-on emotional roller coaster. Even so, Martina beamed because Vale looked like he was actually enjoying himself. And honestly, that's all that matters because he's been so crushed lately. Carol burst into laughter like she couldn't believe it. She's never seen Vale this fired up before. Next day, Simone was buzzing. She threw her arms up, cheering because she finally got a real night of sleep and woke up to a huge breakfast. And now the whole crew could kick into gear hunting that hidden hot spring. Yeah, they means the others too, even though most of them barely slept after that sleeping spot showdown. And while dinner hit hard, breakfast was even better, because it was Martina's first time tasting that flavor. Hanan practically worshipped those sticky natto beans, even if Chiara couldn't handle them, and Vale was still stunned he could munch natto in this world. So yeah, it felt weirdly nostalgic. Now they're headed back to the hot spring, and Charlotte's clutching a map like it's their lifeline, says it's waiting in the valley ahead. The terrain's brutal, and so far there's been zero sign of any hot spring. Still, that map only sketches the basics, so they'll have to hunt it down for real. Kyara pushed forward and snapped a warning, "Careful, that foot's getting worse." And then the ground beneath her crumbled with a sudden crack. Lucky for Vale, she snatched Chiara at the last second, Chiara's knees buckled and she started to drop to the floor. She stumbled to the ground and let out a heavy sigh. She never expected the trail to be this brutal, and with their luggage, one wrong step could spell disaster. Right then, Simone snapped into action. She'd already made up her mind, and nobody's coming here anyway. So she snaps into her dragon form like a switch flipping in midair. Good call. If anyone can sniff out that hot spring from the air, it's them. Out there, Hainan was staring up like. He peered out over that endless forest, so packed with green it looked untouchable, and somehow it still felt like nobody ever dared to come here. Simone then jerked her head left and right, snorted that familiar scent, and the whole group instantly got thrown off, like something just didn't add up. It's exactly like that hot spring village, except Chiara and the others feel nothing at all. Maybe, just maybe, dragon form sharpens her senses. Either way, they're touching down and heading out to explore. Chiara leaned on her staff, groaning through her teeth. This place is even wilder than before, and the visibility's awful. Plants are choking every corner. Simone sniffed the air, stalking the shadows, and he pointed at the dark path, and that rotten smell was leaking from deep inside the forest, so they had no choice but to push forward. Vale barked that everyone needed to watch their steps, watch the monsters, and never get split up, and Hanan nodded hard, saying they should stay close the whole way. But the second she said that, she totally slipped, face first, smashing into a bush. At this rate, she's the one who's most likely to get lost, and yeah, Chiara can't talk either. And hey, she's small too. Martina then pitched the idea, hold hands while we move. Simone steps out first, and everyone else lines up behind her, linking up in order of roll. So they wouldn't get split up, and they pushed deeper down the road, until Chiara suddenly stumbled right into Vale's arms again. Another win for Chiara. Charlotte and Martina pinned her with razor glares, fuming that she kept yanking her veil back on. Chiara's cheeks flared as she blurted, I didn't mean to, but it's already over, too late. She pulled that slick move, didn't she? And they're gonna fall right for it just like that. Just then Hainan burst in, yelling that the dragon tree sword is reacting, and the smell is getting stronger, but it looks like they hit a dead end, hemmed in by a wall of plants. Hold up, wait, I'm barely seeing steam leak out. Something's got to be hiding behind this, right? Charlotte and Chiara fired off magic to rip open a path, and just like that, they finally found what they came for, the hot spring. And yep, it was really right there. Hold up, don't get carried away yet. Sure, it's a hot spring, but that doesn't mean it can magically fix weapons, so this is exactly when you need to stay sharp and cautious. Simone tested the water quality, and somehow there's no problem at all. Charlotte even set up a monster-repelling barrier around them. Next, Vale plunged the dragon tree sword straight into the water. And then, boom, it started glowing like something alive. Chiara can't tell if she's doing this right, but the moment she sees it, she knows the repair process is finally underway. Done. When I lean in, the cracks shrink little by little, and it looks like those hot spring rumors were real. Sure, the healing's slow, but a full recovery might not be just wishful thinking. At this pace, it's gonna drag on for ages. From what Vale's been told, it takes a whole day to pull off. At least that's what the game used to say. That shook Charlotte to the core. So what now? They can't just bail halfway down the mountain either. Martina showed up with something good, so really, there's nothing to worry about at all. It's a full camping set. Everyone scattered and got everything ready fast, then even hunted down fish for their dinner. As the night swallowed the world, they traded shifts at the hot spring. Now it's Charlotte and Vale's turn to keep watch. The two sat shoulder to shoulder while Vale slid a warm cup of tea into her hands, and she couldn't believe it. He actually ended up loving this like it was just a normal camping trip. Charlotte thought it was the most fun she'd ever had, because she'd never camped out like this with someone, not once. But since the day they met, he's kept dragging her to these unbelievable places she didn't even know existed. Yeah, Vale's been replaying that moment where he tried to drag her along. Then they went out to play, and somehow came back with her gorgeous dress all ruined and filthy. But he's ecstatic. She still remembers it as that happy little moment. And now, they're diving back in, making new memories together non-stop from here on out. Charlotte flushed bright red and whipped her head away from him. Vale snapped, "What's wrong?" But Charlotte only shrugged and said smoke stung her eyes. Sure, that's a flimsy excuse. She knows Martina and Chiara are eyeing Vale too, but she still can't help herself. Just then the hot spring burst into brilliant light, snapping the world awake. Waking. Charlotte woke the others up, then leaned in close and studied it. And when he peered into that steaming hot spring, he felt it. Raw, top-tier magical power pouring out like a live wire, way stronger than anything he'd sensed during the day. And most importantly, magic is pouring into the dragon tree sword. And that could spark a massive power-up, especially with the Dragon Tree Sword, where its farming abilities might have just skyrocketed. Beast Vale's mind raced. Was the game's secret right? It claimed there was only a sliver of a chance the performance could spike, and what if they just hit that freak rare moment? Every light died at once, then you ripped the dragon. He yanked the tree sword out of the water, and when he looked closely, the whole blade had changed, even the handle. And honestly, the magic has leveled up big time. If you just hold it, you can feel that the stored power sits on a whole different plane. Now they can finally restart the farm. And since Charlotte's already here, she pushes them to test what the sword can really do. Vale buys the idea and starts trying to grow a flower. It started out close. Then it erupted into a colossal tree that clawed the sky and trapped Martina, Hanan, and Simone inside. This is terrible. He can't rein in the sword's insane power. Back on the farm, Vale yanked at his usual vegetable routine, but nothing would grow right, like his hands were totally useless. He couldn't control any of it at all. Right then, Claudia showed up and pushed him to finally take a break. When the woodmen haul those tomatoes into view, the harvest looks almost too perfect, like it's gone weirdly overboard, and that can only mean one thing. They can't sell this batch to the market either. The veggies are way better than before, but the magical power tweak backfired. Now keeping a steady cultivation rhythm is a total struggle. Vale is thrilled this sword got stronger, but can he actually survive the brutal, massive magic power it's packing? But the real cause still isn't pinned down yet, so they'll dig into it. He handed them vegetables soaked in the sword's magic and water from the hidden hot spring, and once the results come back, they'll reach out, but it'll take a little time. Depending on how this all plays out, he might even have to learn magic control techniques at the Royal Academy. Vale groaned and clutched his head like it was going to split. So yeah, that means he's getting dragged away from the farm again for a while. As Hanan and Simone walked back, they yelled over at Vale, "You've got a visitor." Vale bolted back inside, and he was. Gregory greeted him the moment he arrived, and Martino slid over a steaming cup of herbal tea. Vale apologized for not being able to swing by the trading company lately, but Gregory brushed it off. He's buried in adjusting the sorting right now, so what can you do? Still, Gregory made sure to say he really appreciates Vale for coming through with those vegetables. Everyone's on pins and needles, begging his vegetables to hit the market again, because every shipment turns into a full-on scramble, and Vale is desperate to meet their hopes. So why is he here today? The truth is, Gregory has something he just can't wait to talk about. In just 2 weeks, a ball is set to light up a noble's mansion. Way less flashy than the ones inside royal castles, but still huge because the country's heavy hitters will be there. There'll be food for the guests, yet the plan for the vegetables is suddenly falling apart. News just hit. The weather turned wild in the place they source from, and the crops got totally wiped out. A chef pointed you to his farm as a backup supplier, because he knows these are rough times, especially with the Dragon Tree Sword acting unstable. But he's also fully convinced this chaos is a huge opportunity. If folks out there are counting on Vale for vegetables, he's ready to help in any way he can. So Gregory slid him a list with exactly which vegetables they needed, and how many, and even what dishes they were planning to cook. Vale hoarded the seed data for every one of these types in the sorter so he can grow them, and he's confident he'll hit the deadline on time. Still, there's a real risk the flavor of each vegetable won't stay perfectly consistent. Potatoes and pumpkins should be fine even if they balloon a bit, so the menu still works, and it frees him up to tackle the other vegetables first. Martina even promised him the whole dungeon will pitch in, so he can hand it over, and Gregory was thrilled, already ready to inform the client right away. When it came to the client, Vale couldn't help wondering whose noble bloodline this was. Turns out it was the Tavers family. That's the house where Martinez's father cooks, because he's their personal chef. That same night, the whole crew huddled up for a brainstorming sprint, and for the next 2 weeks, they committed to growing vegetables with everything they had, cutting the trading company completely out. Martina also laid out her situation to them, swallowed her pride, apologized for waiting so long to speak up, but she doesn't need pity because they truly get what she's feeling. It's brutal trying to talk when parents are on the table, but don't worry, they'll cook up vegetables so insanely good that her father will be left staring like, "Wait, how is this real?" These next 2 weeks are going to be brutal, but they'll throw everything they've got into it. So they threw themselves into the fields and grew every life-saving thing: potatoes, pumpkins, tomatoes, onions, whatever they needed to survive. 2 weeks later, they hauled the crops straight to Gregory, and he leaned in to inspect everything. "I can't believe it. Every single detail is dead on, from their massive size to how many there are, and somehow they actually nailed it." He blurted that they were incredible as Vale scratched the back of his head. Sure, things didn't always run smooth, but with everyone backing them up, they still pulled it all together and got everything ready. Anyway, they'll drop them off at the Tavers estate. Gregory even asked if Chiara and Hanan were coming too. But nope, they're not the only ones you should be worried about. Right on cue, a carriage driven by Claudia pulled up. She'd come to deliver all of them to where they needed to go. And just like that, it exploded into a huge crowd. Vale froze when he spotted Martina already crammed inside the carriage. Then he hurriedly asked if she was really okay to come along, only for Martina to clench her fist, trembling with nerves over what her father might say. But dodging him isn't going to cut it. This is the moment, because Vale's here too, and she'll talk him into finally recognizing them the right way. If he objects, Simon will turn into a dragon and loom over him. Wait, that's nuts. She'll just wreck the kitchen instead. After a long, grueling trek, they finally rolled up to the Tavers estate, and the butler, flanked by a few maids, came out to greet them. They blurted out how grateful they were for agreeing to their sudden request, and Vale handed over the basket, because honestly, it should have been them thanking the people who trusted them with it. They laid out the vegetables for you, but like he said earlier, a few of them are pretty big, and they might be a pain to manage. Is this going to be okay? Someone else picked up, smiling through the call, and told him it was totally fine, because their skilled chefs would throw everything they had into cooking with them. Meet Hugo, running the kitchen, and Martina's dad. And when Vale introduced himself, he slid a tomato straight into Hugo's hands the moment Hugo asked for a taste. Hugo took one bite, and his taste buds lit up like fireworks. Did he really raise them all by himself? Vale was about to speak. Then Martina cut in and said, nope, everyone in the dungeon helped raise them. The moment the maids spotted her, they practically swarmed her in an instant, bombarding her with question after question. But he got cut off when Hugo called Martina, before he could even get a word out. Another chef stormed over and told Hugo, it's almost time, prep starts right now. He had to get to work soon, so he begged Vale to hold on for a bit, so they could talk later. Then once they were done, their butler swept the whole group to the reception room. Vale sank into the plush couch, sweeping his eyes across the jaw-dropping mansion. Damn, this place is impressive, right? Only him, Martina, and Chiara were inside, since everyone else had split off on the guided tour. Chiara spun around to Martina, since she was the only one left standing. She doesn't really look like her father, does she? His expression even feels stiff, like he's holding something back, though maybe that's where her strength came from. Still, everyone kept saying she looks more like her mother. Right then, a maid strode in to check on Martina, someone who'd taken care of her when she was little, and even helped her study after her dad started cooking for this place. Martina immediately introduced Vale and Chiara, the people she was living with now, and the maid lit up with joy. Because it looked like Martina had not just grown up, but found real friends beyond the walls too. She couldn't believe it. Her vegetables ended up saving the day, and now that she's here, would they want to check out the kitchen? Vale worried it might mess up the cooking, like they'd be in the way. Then the maid just smiled and told them it was totally fine, as long as they watched from the window. And besides, Hugo already gave them the green light. Slipped into the kitchen to watch the chef work their magic. They were pure intensity, like a perfectly synced unit, probably forged through brutal training. Everyone crushed it but their eyes. His eyes kept snapping back to Hugo, because the way he moved was so sharp it felt like watching Martina cook. Pure precision, no wasted motion. Yeah, that tracks, because of course their family would end up like this, right? Once the cooking was finished, they finally wiped the burners clean. Hugo burst out of the kitchen, walking up to his daughter to ask if being an adventurer is pure adrenaline. Martina lit up and said it was pure fun. Every single day feels meaningful. And she was so happy she became one that she's hoping he'll let her keep being an adventurer. Hugo let out a heavy sigh. She was even more talented than he'd ever been at cooking. And that's exactly why he'd once dreamed of her becoming the greatest chef the whole continent would talk about. But now, he realized he'd been pushing his own dream onto her. Now it clicks for him. Just by the vegetables she handed over, he can tell she's been growing like crazy, carving out her own path with zero hesitation. So she needs to step out there, chase her dream, and carve her name into the world as an adventurer. Just make sure she never pushes herself too hard, because he can't stop worrying about what could happen to her. Then Hugo spun toward Vale, grabbed him by both shoulders, and demanded, practically a threat, that he take real care of his daughter. And when it came to today's rare veggies, their wild flavor, every last bite, it was all downright incredible, and that's exactly why Vale's dishes landed perfectly. Hearing that was the best possible compliment a farmer could get. And Hugo's not just saying it to be polite. Those veggies were way better than anything he's ever tasted before. So would they actually keep feeding that mansion with vegetables? Vale couldn't even process it. He just stared, stunned. Sure, yeah, it might drag between shipments, but if you're good with that, then absolutely. Hugo thanked him, then slipped away with a goodbye, telling him he'd sort the contract details later through the trading company, but right now he was heading back to the kitchen. Once he was gone, Vale, Chiara, and Martina locked in a triumphant high-five like, "We did it." They turned toward the reception room and, bam, the ballroom guests started rolling in, and with the dishes already cleared out, Vale figured it was time to slip out, because it was way past late. Charlotte still had to be found, so Chiara grabbed Martina and sprinted off to ask a servant if anyone had spotted her and the others, while Vale stood there waving goodbye. Then he heard that familiar voice, right behind him. Dirk and their father, right there in the middle of it all. Once he heard that Charlotte and the others had stormed back to the reception room, Martina and Chiara raced back to the exact spot where they had left Vale, so he could duck behind a wall and disappear. As soon as he clocked who was right beside him, Dirk rubbed his head in frustration, wondering why he always ends up in the worst possible spots. Then Vale told him, "I'm here because they called me in to work today." But Dirk didn't buy a word of it. He's convinced he slipped back in just to hawk his wares again, and Vale's about to snap back. Back when their father finally spoke, didn't he just snap that he never wanted to see that face again? And yet here he is, still lugging that beat-up sword. Vale fired back, swearing it wasn't some shabby blade at all. Because to him, this trusted partner has done its job perfectly. Their father froze in shock. He'd never heard them mouth off like that before. But they couldn't hang around. Someone called them in, and the guests were told to step into the hall. Dirk spun around and shoved the urgency into his father, "Go." But Vale tried to intercept them, pleading, "Wait, just listen to me." Fuming, Dirk whipped around and yanked his collar tight in his grip. So does he really think someone like him gets to talk to Dirk like they're equals? Yeah. He should have hauled himself back and stayed in his dirt where he belongs. Then, right after saying it, Dirk stormed out when his father called him to meet the other guests, while Vale just stood there, quietly adjusting his cloak. And just as he clocked Martina and Chiara staring at him, worried to the bone. And just like that, they ditched the quiet moment and rushed back to the rest of the group. When they finally arrived, they stared, because all three of them showed up dressed to the nines. Chiara shot them a confused look, and Charlotte laughed it off, saying she'd just gone to pay her respects to the head of the household earlier. And honestly, he was over the moon, especially about the vegetable offering. And he even pulled them in, inviting all three to the ball tonight. You're all welcome. But she couldn't shake the worry about Martina and her father, until Martina stepped in and promised they'd already made things right for real, and honestly, it was a huge relief. Simone can barely contain her excitement. There's a big dinner coming to celebrate their makeup, and Hanan's about to dive in and eat so much it's ridiculous. Claudia snapped them back to reality. This wasn't some eating contest, then wheeled toward Chiara and Martina, eyes narrowed, asking what was wrong because they looked like something was seriously off. They stared at each other in stunned silence, stuck for words, because everyone was hyped for what came next. But if those two tangled with the Orlando family again, that ball could flip from hype to full-blown disaster in a heartbeat. They've got to sneak out of here. No time for speeches, they're ready to ditch the whole party. When Vale suddenly cut in, he declared he'd take part. Seeing Martina today snapped it into focus. He had to prove to his family he's grown into a real independent farmer, and he needed to face them head-on too. Claudia shot them a look and told them to get changed. She had everyone's outfits ready. She packed them straight into the carriage because that's what a perfect maid does. Hanan leaned over, staring at the dance floor as guests spun with their partners, and honestly, it was unreal. The fact they even saved seats for them on the second floor was insanely thoughtful, so now they could finally breathe. But when she turned to Vale, he was still sweating like crazy. What happened to that swagger from earlier? He's never been good at these stuffy gatherings, and sure enough, there are nobles he can't stand in the room. So she grabs his attention and tells him to straighten up, because he's dressed to the nines. Right then, Simone came in carrying plates stacked with food like mountains. Seriously, there was enough for everyone. So they dove in and ate, because this was the exact kind of meal that could refill their tank. And thinking back, Simone realized it wasn't just luck at all. It was Vale's vegetables that kept her alive when she got stranded in the forest. Yeah, back then, she devoured her lunchbox clean, totally unstoppable because every bite was ridiculously good. And man, those memories still hit hard. Like it's unbelievable that Hainan's veggies turned into dishes that glorious. She started out nervous, but it all turned into something she can't help but beam about. Vale nodded and agreed, because he's honestly proud he had the guts to take the job and show up. Vale whipped his head around and spotted Claudia staring down from the first floor. He shot her a question. What's wrong? She insisted it was nothing, just Charlotte and the others were taking way too long to come back. The three of them had gone to pick flowers, and since Chiara and Martina were with her, she figured it would all be fine. But she should have just gone with them, because what if they got kidnapped or worse, got bitten by bugs? Vale stepped up and volunteered to go look. They were already done eating anyway. Hainan and Simone are coming with him too. Right there on the corner, the three they'd been hunting stood shoulder to shoulder, just watching the crowd like they already knew what was coming. They were dead set on tracking down the two from the Orlando family first, but it's like the whole place swallowed them. Somehow, they're insanely hard to find, and there are just too many people here. Martina leaned in and asked, Charlotte, do you know Dirk? And Charlotte nodded, because even at the academy, Dirk was infamous. He parades around with that divine sword and his high and mighty name, bothering every girl he lays eyes on. Seriously, it's disgusting. Chiara said they just ignored him, and Charlotte froze like, wait, did that jerk follow us too? Then the talk got yanked away when someone finally shoved their way toward them. Chapters wrap up at 22. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you love this manga. Have a great day.